Hi everyone, we hope you're doing well. We're hanging in there though honestly, we haven't been getting much sleep lately. Today, we want to answer a question we get a lot: how do we publish our audiobooks? First, we post most audiobooks on Patreon as paid content. They stay paid for a few months. After that, they become free to listen to on Patreon forever. A few weeks later, we post them on other places like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, X. Lately, things have been a bit slow in terms of new members. So we'd love your help. Please share our site with your friends or in places like Facebook groups, Twitter, X, Discord, Reddit, or novel forums. Even one share can really help us grow. Thanks so much for your support. Ridiculous. Chenli did not interrupt the low-ranking official. He was also furious, but now was not the time to be angry. He had to think of a way to stop the demonic sex actions. A constable on the side said, "My lord, according to the night watchman, there are at least 100 people in the demonic sect. With so many people yet to be tracked down, I'm afraid." Chenli glared at him and said angrily, "You think I don't know that?" The constable was silent. Chenli continued to have a headache. Even if he were to turn a blind eye to the current situation, he would be the first to be questioned when the emperor returned to the capital. After all, his duty was to protect the safety of the people. Too unbridled. Chenli took a deep breath and stood up. The low-ranking official hastily asked, "Lord, where are you going?" Chenli flicked his sleeves and said, "Since a first-rate expert cannot deal with the current situation, I shall invite a top expert." The low-ranking official and the constable looked at each other and smiled bitterly. This lord was good in all aspects, but he was too upright. The world was not black or white. Under the night sky, the capital fell into silence. Figures jumped quickly on the eaves. They were dressed in black with black scarves covering their faces, revealing only their eyes. All of them held swords and sharp weapons in their hands, and they were as light as swallows. Behind them was a white-robed person chasing after them with a sword in their hand. The white-robed person wore a opera mask and wielded a sword with both hands. Looking at her posture, she should be a woman. She was extremely fast and flashed past like a swan. She quickly caught up to a black-robed man and slashed with her sword. The black-robed man leaped to the side to dodge the sword, but his ankle was grabbed by the white-robed woman and was pulled back. PFFT. Under the moonlight, the sound of the blade penetrating flesh was so terrifying. Droplets of blood sprinkled on the eaves and fell on the street. The men in black stopped one after another and quickly surrounded the woman in white. The leader of the black-robed men held a large saber in his hand. His physique was as sturdy as an iron tower and was extremely domineering. He stared at the white-robed woman and coldly said, "Are the white-robed guards really going to interfere in this matter?" The white-robed woman snorted and said, "The white robes of Great Jing protect the country and the people." The burly man said in a deep voice, "Didn't your master tell you not to come out at night?" The white-robed woman did not answer and suddenly attacked the burly man. The surrounding black-robed man immediately attacked. The white-robed woman's figure was like a ghost and her footwork was profound. It was as if she had split into several clones to dodge the swords and knives coming from all directions. She spun around and stabbed the burly man. The burly man's eyes instantly turned fierce. He raised his saber with one hand and his true energy exploded like an explosion, forcing the white-robed woman back. "Humphrey, a top expert. No wonder you dared to stir up muddy water alone. In that case, I'll send you to your death," the burly man said with a murderous aura and raised his saber to kill the white-robed man. On the other side, in front of the gates of the palace, Chenli was escorted here by 4 bailiffs, but he was stopped by the palace guards. He immediately took out a token and said, "This is the imperial token given to me by the Empress. I am eager to see the Empress." One of the guards said expressionlessly, "The palace is closed tonight. No one is allowed to enter or leave the palace." Hearing this, Chenli was furious and angrily said, "Right now, the thieves in the capital are acting recklessly. His Majesty is not here, and the Empress can preside over the capital. If you stop me, everyone who dies tonight will blame you. When His Majesty comes back, not only will he be beheaded, but he will also execute your entire family." The guards frowned. The expressions of the other guards also changed, but they did not immediately move aside and continued to block. No matter how Chenli threatened them, they would not him through. Under Chenli's orders, the 4 bailiffs began to break in. "Impudent! Chenli, you've trespassed the palace. Even if your uncle is the Minister of Revenue, you will still implicate your entire family." A shrill voice sounded, startling the 4 bailiffs into stopping. Chenli's face also turned pale. Eunuch Li, the head eunuch, came with his hands behind his back. He walked out from the darkness of the palace gates with a contemptuous smile on his face. Chenli gritted his teeth and said, "Eunuch Li, the situation is urgent. I'll have to trouble Eunuch Li to make an exception." Eunuch Li calmly said, "Chenli, There are no thieves in the capital. Don't talk nonsense. The Empress is going to sleep early tonight and must not be disturbed. Go back. Minister Chin has a good relationship with me, so let me remind you that fish and shrimps are not allowed to mess around in the lake. Be careful not to attract trouble. When Chen Li heard that, his anger surged. He asked in a deep voice, the conflict between the Yang family and the Hong family is so great that it can be concealed from His Majesty? The plague has yet to be eliminated, and hundreds of people have died in the city in just a few days. Throughout history, there has been peace and prosperity under the Emperor. How can there be such a ridiculous record? Eunuch Li's expression instantly turned ice cold. Just as he was about to speak, a voice sounded from afar. He saw a white-robed woman running rapidly on the eaves, followed by dozens of black-robed men. The white-robed woman landed on the ground and ran towards the palace gates. The group of black-robed men stopped and stood under the eaves. The bright moon hung in the sky. Under the dim night sky, the people in black were like ghosts from the netherworld as they looked at the palace gates from afar. The white-robed woman came to the gates of the palace. She only had a sword left, and her left arm was dripping with blood. It drooped naturally. It seemed like her injuries were very serious. Eunuch Li, the demonic sect is creating chaos. Please kill the evil thieves. The white-robed woman gritted her teeth and her voice trembled. It was obvious that she was at the end of her ropes. Eunuch Li's expression did not change as he asked, where did this demonic sect come from? Where did these thieves came from? The white-robed woman trembled and fell into silence. Chen Li's expression was gloomy. The four constables looked at the group of people in black in the distance in horror. Eunuch Li looked around at the surrounding guards and said, no one is allowed to enter the palace tonight. Regardless of their status, if anyone dares to let anyone go, their head will not be guaranteed. Yes. The royal guards hastily responded, and all of them were extremely nervous. Eunuch Li stared at the woman in white and said, this white guard left her post without permission, but I have no right to punish you. Please leave. The white-robed woman straightened her back. With the mask on, no one could see her expression. Chen Li took a deep breath and came to her. He said in a low voice, if you still want to live, escape to Longkai Temple. The white-robed man nodded slightly and turned to rush towards Longkai Temple. As soon as she moved, the group of men in black chased after her, and they quickly disappeared into the night. Eunuch Li revealed a spurious smile and said, Longkai Temple? If Longkai Temple is destroyed tonight, you, Chen Li, will not be able to escape death. That is a place that His Majesty cares about. Chen Li stared at him and said, Longkai Temple might not be destroyed. Eunuch Li smiled. At that moment, a group of black crows flew over from the nearby city and headed in the direction the white-robed man had left. Under the night sky, the group of black crows flew with great momentum. When Chen Li saw this scene, his expression changed drastically and he muttered, the night crow flies in the sky. Devil Lord. Eunuch Li smiled and said, I wonder if that immortal priest can stop him? Chen Li immediately turned around and ran. The four constables looked at each other but still chased after him. Ignorant fool. Eunuch Li's expression was gloomy as he coldly snorted. He looked at Longkai Mountain in the distance, shook his head, and muttered, what a pity. He turned around and left, walking into the darkness with his hands behind his back. Whoosh! 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 Arrows tore through the night sky and flew towards the fleeing white-robed woman. She nimbly dodged them, but more blood spilled from her left arm. As the white-robed woman fled, she was puzzled. They seem to be chasing me here on purpose. They are not in a hurry to kill me. Even though she was confused, she still tried her best to escape as she got closer and closer to the mountain. When she arrived at the foot of Longkai Mountain, she stopped and turned to look at the group of people in black. The men in black landed on the ground one after another, 50 feet away from her. Why aren't you running anymore? The burly man in the lead sneered and his words were filled with mockery. The woman in white did not answer and just faced them in silence. The two sides confronted each other, and for a moment, no one took action. One of the men in black whispered, Boss, are you still not going to attack? The burly man frowned and his eyes flickered. At this moment, the white-robed woman said, I see. The reason why you released me is to use me to ascend the mountain. Your goal is Longkai Temple, but Longkai Temple is under the protection of His Majesty. If you barge in, His Majesty will definitely investigate and endanger the master behind you. If I lead you up the mountain, Longkai Temple will suffer a calamity like a fish in the net. Their fate will be bad, right? The burly man snorted and said, a dying person talks too much. Kill her. As soon as he finished speaking, a black-robed man immediately rushed towards the white-robed woman with a blade. The white-robed woman did not dodge. She felt helpless. It was not that she had deliberately waited, but she was exhausted from her severe injuries and could no longer go up the mountain. She wanted to scare them away, but she did not expect them to still attack. The black-robed man raised his saber, wanting to chop off the white-robed woman's head. Whoosh! A sound tore through the night sky. Before anyone could react, a sword descended from the sky. The sword light flashed and the blade directly pierced through the black-robed man. Blood splattered as the black-robed man was nailed to the ground by the sword. His body convulsed and his eyes widened in fear and despair. Everyone looked over and saw that the sword was stabbed through the back of the black-robed man. The sword trembled and released a clear cry. This sword was the famous Tai Hang sword. Chapter 16 Devil Lord bows down. The burly man stared at the Tai Hang sword, and so did the other men in black, as if they were facing a great enemy. They looked at Long Kai Mountain, but they could not see the owner of the Tai Hang sword. The black-robed man, who was nailed to the ground by the Tai Hang sword, turned his head with great difficulty and said in a trembling voice, "Save me." Just as the burly man was about to step forward, the Tai Hang sword suddenly pulled out on its own, flew into the sky, and fell again. This time, it was aimed at the back of the man in black's neck. This scene made everyone widen their eyes as if they had seen a ghost. The burly man was about to swing his saber to block it, but the Tai Hang sword was too fast. PFFT. The black-robed man's neck was pierced, and his body convulsed before he lost all strength. Blood gushed out from the blade, and he died with grievances, his eyes filled with fear. Ghost. Ghost. One of the men in black trembled as he stared at the Tai Hang sword. The other men in black were also frightened. How terrifying was a sword that could kill on its own at night? They were all experts who roamed unhindered in the martial arts world. They had traveled everywhere for so many years, but when had they ever seen such an evil sword? The burly man pretended to be calm and shouted, "Which expert is it? Why aren't you showing yourself yet? Why are you acting mysterious?" The Tai Hang sword flew into the air and pointed its tip at the burly man. The moonlight was reflected by the blade and the burly man felt an unprecedented fear. On the mountain, Zhang Qingsheng stood at the top of the mountain gate of Longkai Temple with White Dragon on his shoulder. The cold wind at night blew his black hair. He looked down the mountain. The boundless fog could not stop his gaze, and his eyes were so cold. As his cultivation increased, his senses naturally became stronger. Right now, he could sense the entire Longkai Mountain. When a group of true chi fluctuations approached the foot of the mountain, he came here and witnessed the battle below and heard their conversation. The true chi of those people in black was extremely similar to the ghost-eyed evil king. Looking at their attire, it was obvious that they were from the evil sects that had recently wreaked havoc in the capital. It was not a coincidence that they dared to cause trouble at Longkai Mountain. Zhang Qingsheng snorted and executed the imperial sword technique. The Tai Hang sword that was suspended in midair immediately struck out. The burly man was so frightened that he immediately leaped up, but his subordinates behind him had their throats sealed by the Tai Hang sword, spilling blood on the road. The Tai Hang sword quickly circled around and massacred the people in black one by one. Its target was not only the burly man. The burly man waved his knife and slashed, and his blade was knocked away by a powerful force. The burly man took 10 steps back. His eyes bulged and were filled with disbelief. Such powerful strength. How is this possible? The burly man panicked. He was also a top expert, but when he sensed the true chi on the Tai Hang sword, he felt defeated. The difference between heaven and earth. In less than 3 breaths, half of the people in black died tragically and fell on the long road at the foot of the mountain. The white-robed woman stood in the distance and quietly watched the battle. The opera mask covered her face, but from her trembling body, it could be seen that her heart was not calm. The burly man gritted his teeth and raised his saber again. The Tai Hang sword suddenly sped up and pierced through the chest of a black-robed man. Then, it soared up and drew a perfect arc in the night sky as it dashed towards the burly man. The burly man was shocked and quickly waved his saber. True chi spread out along the blade and formed a barrier of astral chi visible to the naked eye. However, the Tai Hang sword directly shattered the barrier and pierced through his chest. Damn it! The burly man staggered backward and put his saber on the ground to support his body. PFFT. Then, the Tai Hang sword came from behind and pierced his throat. Thump. The burly man half knelt on the ground and similarly died with remaining grievances. However, he did not collapse and relied on his large saber to support his body. His head drooped and blood flowed down like a stream. Seeing him die, the remaining men in black were scared out of their wits and fled in succession. Zhang Qingsheng did not intend to let them go and the Tai Hang sword continued to attack. Under the night sky, a cold glint streaked across the long road, galloping on the eaves and killing people in black. In the distance, a group of black crows was rushing over, and they were getting faster and faster. Zhang Qingsheng raised his eyebrows and muttered, "What powerful true chi." He controlled the Tai Hang sword to return. The further away the Tai Hang sword was from him, the less powerful it would be, and the closer it was, the more lethal it would be. The Tai Hang sword stopped in front of the white-robed woman. Looking at the sword, The white-robed woman was extremely nervous. She could not understand whether this sword was sentient or had a master. She remembered the legend of Taoist Master Changsheng in Longkai Temple. It was said that Taoist Master Changsheng of Longkai Temple was an immortal god that had descended to the mortal world. At the age of 14, he could kill a top expert. At that moment, she saw a group of black crows flying over. They were densely packed and brought great momentum, similar to locusts passing through. The white-robed woman immediately said, "Senior, the other party is the Devil Lord of the Devil Sect. He has been a top expert for 30 years. Perhaps his martial arts has advanced to another level. He cannot be underestimated." In any case, she could only rely on the sword in front of her. The group of black crows flew to the top of the white-robed woman and began to circle around her. Then, a loud voice sounded, "I didn't expect Longkai Temple to have a sky-high view." At the top of the mountain, in a courtyard, Taoist Master King Su opened his eyes and quickly moved. In the palace, a pair of eyes opened in a dim hall. The eyes were green, and not long after, the eyes closed again. They're a heaven arrival realm expert. Could he also be a heaven arrival realm expert? Zhang Qingsheng thought silently. Forget it. He was too lazy to ask any more questions. He should just kill him. Zhang Qingsheng no longer wanted to know who was controlling everything behind the scenes. In any case, he would kill them all if they came. This was a good opportunity for him to transcend the tribulation and obtain a survival reward. It was not enough to rely on the Imperial Sword technique to kill this person. After all, the distance was a little far. Zhang Qingsheng leaped and disappeared into the fog. The black crows hovered and confronted the Tai-Hang sword. Only the cries of the black crows could be heard under the night sky. "Why don't you show yourself? You have to give me an explanation for killing my people." The mysterious and loud voice sounded again. The white-robed woman suddenly heard footsteps behind her and she subconsciously turned around. A figure brushed past her and the only thing she saw was a young and handsome face. Zhang Qingsheng. Zhang Qingsheng, who was dressed in a cyan blue Taoist robe, had a scabbard on his waist and a horsetail whisk in his hand. There was also a white snake coiled around his shoulder. Such an image caused the white-robed woman to be absent-minded. Her body tensed up and she did not dare to move. Zhang Qingsheng looked at the black crows in front of him and asked, "What explanation do you want?" "A cover-up." He had already seen the figure hidden among the crows. It was a middle-aged man in black robes with disheveled hair that hung in the night sky. He looked like a demon that had descended from the sky, and the image was rather horrifying. The black-robed man sized up Zhang Qingsheng and coldly said, "If you are not King Su, are you the Taoist master who has risen to fame in recent years?" Zhang Qingsheng shook his head and said, "You're too long-winded. Forget it." He suddenly leaped up and kicked at the crows hovering in the night sky. This kick carried the force of 10,000 kilograms and a strong wind pressed down, gradually dispelling the crows. Like a phantom dissipating, the black-robed man's true form was revealed. His expression changed drastically and he immediately waved his palm. Countless leg shadows attacked with an overwhelming force. Before the black-robed man could mobilize his true chi, he was kicked. PFFT the black-robed man vomited blood and was sent flying dozens of feet away. He smashed into the city wall, causing it to collapse and gravel to fly everywhere. He fell to the ground in a sorry state and felt that all his bones were broken. His hands trembled as he propped himself up on the ground and spat out another mouthful of blood. He subconsciously looked up in Zhang Qingsheng's direction and his eyes widened. A sword sped over from his pupils and became larger and larger. "Wait. I have something to say." The black-robed man shouted anxiously, and the Tai-Hang sword stopped. The tip of the sword was only 5 centimeters away from his eyes, and his forehead was covered with cold sweat. Zhang Qingsheng appeared behind the Tai-Hang sword like a ghost. He raised his hand and grabbed the hilt of the sword. He looked down at him expressionlessly and said, "I hope it's not nonsense. Otherwise, you will die a painful death." The black-robed man took a deep breath. He felt the killing intent and gritted his teeth. "I want to live." He originally wanted to threaten the other party, but the other party was so ruthless that it was obvious that he did not care about the nobles behind him. Zhang Qingsheng held the Tai-Hang sword as the tip of the sword got closer and closer to the black-robed man. The black-robed man was so frightened that he hastily closed his eyes and said in a trembling voice, "I am willing to acknowledge you as my master and be your slave. Please spare my life." Zhang Qingsheng raised his left hand and waved his horsetail whisk, releasing a seal of life and death that landed on the black-robed man. The black-robed man trembled. Even though he could not feel any pain, he understood that the other party was using a technique and did not dare to resist. Zhang Qingsheng put away his sword and the Tai-Hang sword into its scabbard. He turned around and said, "Follow me up the mountain." The black-robed man opened his eyes and breathed a long sigh of relief. He got up shakily and staggered. Zhang Qingsheng passed by the white-robed woman and suddenly stopped. What did you see tonight? The white-robed woman gritted her teeth and said, I only saw a mysterious expert killing a few fiends and driving away the Devil Lord. Zhang Qingsheng smiled and walked towards the stairs that led to the top of the mountain. This battle had boosted his confidence greatly. Heaven or rival realm experts were not as terrifying as he had imagined. The black-robed man, who was referred to as the Devil Lord, brushed past the white-robed woman in humiliation and followed Zhang Qingsheng silently. The two of them went up the mountain and disappeared into the night. The white-robed woman slumped to the ground as he panted heavily. She would never forget this night. Is he really a human? The white-robed woman muttered to himself. She had never seen someone with such powerful martial arts. That was the Devil Lord, and he was still powerless to resist him. After a while, Chen Li rushed over with 4 constables. He looked at the corpses on the ground with a panicked expression. When he saw the white-robed woman, he immediately ran over and crouched in front of her. Who killed them? Chen Li asked. When he saw that the white-robed woman was still alive, his expression softened. The white-robed man answered, I don't know either. He was dressed like an old beggar. After killing these people and repelling the Devil Lord, he left. Chen Li was silent for a moment before he said, You might not be able to return to the White Guard. The white-robed woman remained silent. In front of the mountain gate, Taoist Master King Su looked down at Zhang Qingsheng who was walking on the mountain path and the Devil Lord behind him. Taoist Master King Su's eyes flickered as he asked, Qingsheng, do you know the Devil Lord? Zhang Qingsheng smiled and said, He's the Devil Lord? I don't know him. He wanted to break into the mountain, but I subdued him. Master, it seems like there are many people who want to deal with Long Kai Guan. Leave this guy to me. Perhaps I can ask for the reason why. Taoist Master King Su's pupils dilated. One of them was on the high ground while the other was on the low ground. They stared at each other in silence. The night breeze was unrestrained, and the bright moon hung high in the sky. The flowers and trees on both sides of the mountain path swayed slightly. Chapter 17 Head of Punishment, Grandmaster Taoist Master King Su retracted his gaze and turned around. Tell him not to leave your courtyard. Zhang Qingsheng revealed a smile and continued to move forward with the Devil Lord following closely behind. The disciples of Long Kai Temple had already fallen asleep and were not cultivating, so they could not hear the movements at the foot of the mountain. They were not as skilled as Taoist Master King Su, so they could not sense the fluctuations of true qi. Zhang Qingsheng brought the Devil Lord back to his courtyard and entered the house. He sat on the bed and said, I'll ask you questions while you circulate your energy to heal your injuries. The Devil Lord did not dare to refute. After he closed the door, he sat by the wooden table and meditated. He was hit by the divine shadow leg technique and his internal organs were now severely injured. This trip up the mountain could be said to have cost him half his life. Are you a heaven or rival realm expert? Zhang Qingsheng asked the question he was most concerned about, as this would alter his actions in the future. The Devil Lord forced a smile and said, I am indeed a heaven. Compared to the heaven or rival realm expert in the palace, who is stronger? Naturally, he's stronger. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come all the way to the capital. Although we are both in the same realm, I have only just reached the heaven or rival realm, while he has been already in the heaven or rival realm. The reason why he's in the heaven or rival realm is because most people in the martial arts world think that the heaven or rival realm is the strongest. The Devil Lord could not help but glance at Zhang Qingsheng. Zhang Qingsheng asked, What do you think my chances of winning are against him? The Devil Lord said without hesitation, Naturally, you are stronger. Don't lie. Otherwise, if I die, you will die. I have inserted the seal of life and death into your body. This seal can allow me to easily decide your life. I don't know. I challenged him 20 years ago. When I faced him back then, it was just like now. I reckon the entire martial arts world doesn't know how powerful he will be 20 years later. The Devil Master lamented. In the eyes of ordinary martial arts practitioners, he was already an invincible expert. However, only he knew that there were many more experts above him. He merely took advantage of the title of the Lord of the Devil Sect. Zhang Qingsheng continued to ask. The Devil Lord would answer any question he asked. He would also honestly explain the situation if he did not know the answer. His attitude was rather sincere. He did not bring the Devil Sect disciples here to avenge the ghost-eyed evil king, but to be a knife for someone else. That person claimed to be the head of punishment. He wore a mask and was highly skilled in martial arts. He was definitely an expert at the heaven or rival realm. He is extremely powerful and claimed that as long as the Devil Sect took the opportunity to eradicate the aristocrats and Long Kai Temple in the city, he would support the Devil Sect and clear their name. The Devil Lord said with a complicated tone. As he spoke, he could not help but cough. His injuries were too serious. Zhang Qingsheng was now aware of the situation of the Devil Sect, which was coincidentally quite similar to the Chen family. The Devil Sect was once the #1 sect in the Chu dynasty. After the Great Jing overthrew the Chu dynasty, the martial arts world also changed. The Devil Sect had once sent disciples to support the Chu dynasty and broke the rules of the martial arts world, causing them to be rejected by the current martial arts world. The court also arrested them everywhere. They could be said to be street rats. According to the rules of the martial arts world, sects were not allowed to participate in the strife of the royal court, let alone in the dynasty's struggles. At least not on the surface. This was also a self-protection system in the martial arts world. Zhang Qingsheng asked, "How dare you trust the head of punishment? Aren't you afraid that he will lie to you?" The Devil Lord answered, "He has the true dragon decree, and seeing the true dragon decree is like seeing the emperor. Therefore, I suspect that he is acting on behalf of the emperor. I didn't expect that there are 3 heaven or rival realm experts hidden in the small capital. No, there are 4 of them, if including you." He was filled with regret. He should not have listened to the words of those people. If he had known earlier, he would have led the Devil Sect away from the Great Jing dynasty. After all, the world was vast, so where could he not live? There were 2 heaven or rival realm experts. Zhang Qingsheng secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, he did not mess around. But logically, it was not abnormal. After all, no one would display their full strength, not even the emperor. The Devil Lord's contact was the head of punishment. Other than the head of the punishment, he had never seen any other aristocrats, so Zhang Qingsheng could not get anything out of him. Zhang Qingsheng suspected that the head of punishment was the emperor, but the emperor had already sailed down to Jiangnan. Then, he asked the Devil Lord about the situation of the Devil Sect. The Devil Sect had hundreds of thousands of disciples, more than 1,000 first-rate experts, and more than 50 top experts. Other than him, there was also a vice sect master who had also reached the heaven or rival realm. However, the vice sect master did not follow them here and just guarded the evil sect. If the Devil Lord did not return, the vice sect master would automatically inherit the position after a year. The Devil Sect was quite powerful. Zhang Qingsheng was a cultivator and was stronger than a martial arts practitioner, but his spiritual force was not endless. Facing this kind of situation, it seemed like he also needed to nurture his own forces. The Devil Lord was a good start. Zhang Qingsheng smiled and said, "Do you think I'm immortal?" The Devil Lord was stunned. He did not understand what he meant, but when he thought of the Tai Hang sword, he felt an inexplicable chill on his back. Could it be? With my appearance, guess how old I am? 17 to 18 years old. What is your actual age? The Devil Lord asked carefully. Zhang Qingsheng had become extremely mysterious in his heart. With a thought from Zhang Qingsheng, the Tai Hang sword on the table automatically unsheathed and hovered around the room. The Devil Lord was so frightened that he trembled. He did not see how Zhang Qingsheng attacked. Previously, he thought that it was a smoke screen, just like his Black Crow Flying Skies technique, which was just to fool people. But now, it seemed like that was not the case. Zhang Qingsheng said, "I need someone to work for me. If you are obedient, I can let bygones be bygones and give you unimaginable benefits. For example." Zhang Qingsheng stared at the Devil Lord and teased, "You're already 60 years old, right? You look quite young. However, with your body that is filled with hidden illnesses, how long do you think you can live? 10 years? 20 years? I think this is the limit. Do you want to live longer? Do you want to pursue stronger strength?" The Devil Lord's heartbeat sped up. When one was old, the thing they feared the most was physical weakness, especially for martial artists. Even the Emperor was searching for immortals all over the world, let alone the Devil Lord. That night, the Devil Lord's heart was in a mess. In a dark palace, Eunuch Li stood in the hall with a gloomy expression. In front of him, there was a figure with his back facing him. That person was wearing purple clothes and a bronze mask. His long hair was tied up under a crown, making him look mysterious and noble. The Devil Lord has disappeared, and we've lost more than half of our people? The purple-robed figure asked. His voice was indifferent, and there were no fluctuations in his emotions. Eunuch Li gritted his teeth and said, "The Devil Lord has disappeared. He's either dead or captured. Fortunately, he doesn't know much, but the other party has the ability to easily kill the Devil Lord. We have to reconsider. Head Shing, what does His Majesty mean? Do he want to get rid of this son or keep him alive? Why did he place him in the capital?" The purple-robed figure was the head of punishment that the Devil Lord had mentioned. The head of punishment turned around, revealing only his right eye under the bronze mask. His eyes were as cold as a snake, shocking Eunuch Li so much that he did not dare to meet his gaze and knelt down in fear. "This servant deserves to die. I shouldn't have questioned the holy decree." Eunuch Li lowered his head and spoke in a trembling voice. His tone was filled with fear and trepidation. The head of punishment stared at him and said, "What His Majesty is thinking has nothing to do with us. What His Majesty wants is the destruction of Longkai Temple, the Yang family, and the Hong family. However, these 3 plans have all been ruined. Uniquely lowered his head and did not even dare to breathe. The head of punishment continued, "From now on, the operation is suspended. Select more experts from Sky Prison and wait for my orders and His Majesty's." "Yes." Uniquely hastily answered. The head of punishment walked toward him and suddenly disappeared. Soon after, he appeared at the entrance of the palace. He looked up at the bright moon and said, "Investigate which expert has disappeared in the past 10 years. For an 18-year-old child to reach the heavenly arrival realm, there must be a Grand Master. The choice of Qingsheng might be related to the remnants of the previous dynasty. We have to investigate those who acted back then." Uniquely turned around and said, "This servant understands." The head of punishment disappeared in front of the door, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. The moon set and the setting sun rose. At noon, in the courtyard, Zhang Qingsheng was using his spiritual force to treat the Devil Lord's injuries. The Devil Master had changed into Longkai Temple's Taoist robe and looked like a weak-old Taoist priest. He did not have the Devil Lord's evil or domineering aura. Feeling the mysterious true chi in his body, the Devil Lord was shocked. What terrifying strength! What kind of martial arts is this? His true chi is more than 10 times stronger than mine. The Demon Lord was overwhelmed with emotions when he thought of what Zhang Qingsheng said last night. Perhaps this was an opportunity. In any case, he could not understand how someone could possess strength that far exceeded a heaven arrival realm expert at the age of 18. Even the young sect master of the Gyuan divine sect was far inferior to him. This master must be an immortal who had descended to the mortal world and was definitely not an ordinary man. Zhang Qingsheng stopped and said, "Go in and recuperate. The medicine on the table was personally concocted by me. You can take it." The Devil Lord stood up, bowed, and entered the house. White Dragon left Zhang Qingsheng's shoulder and climbed towards the house. Zhang Qingsheng stood up and gently brushed the dust off his Taoist robe. Then, he stood with his hands behind his back and looked at the sky, enjoying the sunlight. Not long after, 2 figures entered the courtyard. It was Chen Li. Behind him was a thin constable with his head lowered. Chen Li quickly walked to Zhang Qingsheng and said in a low voice, "Qingsheng, I have something to say. Let's go in. There's no need to enter the house. There are only the 3 of us within a radius of 300 feet. Oh, there's also a snake." Zhang Qingsheng smiled. He had already seen through the identity of the constable. He was the white-robed woman from last night, as her aura was exactly the same as last night. Immortal cultivators were extremely sensitive to auras. Chen Li was stunned for a moment before he said, "The person behind me is from the White Guard and is a good friend of mine. I invited her to kill the Devil Sect disciples, but I pulled her into a conspiracy. Right now, she has nowhere to go and I can't stay in the Chen family. The entire city is heavily guarded, so I can only leave her with you. Can you agree? I'm begging you." Zhang Qingsheng smiled and said, "Of course. Brother, don't worry." Chen Li let out a long breath and swept away the gloominess on his face. He patted Zhang Qingsheng's shoulder and thanked him. He did not stay any longer and left in a hurry, leaving only Zhang Qingsheng and the constable in disguise in the courtyard. After sensing Chen Li's aura leaving, Zhang Qingsheng asked, "What are your plans for the future?" The constable took a step forward and half knelt. She gritted her teeth and said, "Senior, please teach me martial arts. I am willing to give up everything." Last night not only overturned the understanding of the Devil Lord, but also shattered her beliefs. She suddenly felt that everything she had worked hard for in the first half of her life was a joke. Zhang Qingsheng asked, "Is it really everything? What if I ask you to kill Chen Li? It would be a waste not to accept a top expert." The bailiff said in a deep voice, "Kill. Even though he has a benevolent heart, he does not have any strength or means. If he lives, he will only drag more innocent people to the netherworld. What's your name?" "My name is Jai Ankson. My surname is Hu." Chapter 18 Talisman Technique, Martial Arts Sovereign. There were also 4 rooms in the courtyard where Zhang Qingsheng lived, so it was not difficult for the Devil Lord and Hua Jai Ankson to stay there. There were often guests coming to Longkai Temple to stay for the time being, so it was not a problem. Usually, only Wanli and Minayu would come to him, making it easy to hide them. In any case, Taoist Master King Su already knew that he had subdued the Devil Lord, so it was not difficult for him to arrange his identity. Hua Jai Ankson also needed to recuperate. Zhang Qingsheng went into the room to get her medicine. Looking at the Demon Lord in a Taoist robe, her expression was complicated. She did not say anything and took the bottle to the next room. The Devil Lord smiled and said, "That woman is pretty good, better than most men. The Devil Sect has been killing people all night long, but she's the only one among the white-robed guards who came." The white-robed guards was founded in the 2nd year after the founding of the country, and it was directly under the Emperor's control. As for the exact number of guards, no one knew. They did intelligence, abduction, assassination, escort, and other missions. In the past dozens of years, the White Guard had captured countless experts in the pugilistic world, including the ghost-eyed Evil King. Therefore, their name was famous in the pugilistic world. Great Jing White Robes, protecting the country and the people. These words caused countless hot-blooded children to devote themselves to this cause. However, the White-Robed Guard's test was extremely strict, and those who could stand out were at least first-rate experts. Zhang Qingsheng nodded slightly and then meditated in his room. He did not hide himself, because it was impossible for the Devil Lord to secretly learn his cultivation technique and natural skills just by looking. More than half of the Devil sect had been lost, the Devil Lord was missing, and the remaining disciples had also fled the capital. Of course, there were also some unlucky people who had been captured by the Imperial Guards. The crisis in the capital had finally ended, and what was left was the plague, which would take time to solve. In this ancient world, the best way to deal with a plague was to detain the sick. After they died, they would burn their clothes and the plague would naturally end. This was the sadness of the times. Even though Zhang Qingsheng had learned the spring and autumn medical manual, he did not have the heart to help the world. He did not want to go down the mountain. He had wronged the emperor. He originally thought that the plague was man-made, but the Devil Lord said that was not the case. It was only when the plague broke out that they took the opportunity to act. That night, peace returned to the capital. The next morning, Zhang Qingsheng trained in the courtyard and led White Dragon to absorb the essence of the sun and the moon. In the 18th year of the founding of the dynasty, the Devil sect wreaked havoc in the capital. You relied on your own strength to successfully survive the calamity and obtained a survival reward spell, Jade Pure Meridian Cutting Needle. Seeing this line of words, Zhang Qingsheng smiled. When the plague was over, he should be able to obtain another reward. He began to learn the Jade Pure Meridian Cutting Needle. This spell was not used in medicine, but as a needle to kill enemies. Using this spell, true chi would turn into a needle that would break a person's meridians once it entered their body. It was extremely domineering. Overall, this spell did not really increase Zhang Qingsheng's strength. Zhang Qingsheng summarized. The more dangerous a calamity was for oneself, the greater the reward. Just like when he received his cultivation technique and natural skills. He was truly powerless when he was born. At that time, he was in the most dangerous situation. As he became stronger, the danger he could get into should also be lower, but this was also good. If he was really immortal, then what he wanted to pursue was absolute invincibility. As long as he was invincible, he could do whatever he wanted. At present, he could not see through the world. It was hard to say who was the strongest in the world. According to the Devil Lord, there were many great figures in the martial arts world and many grandmasters. There were also talented youngsters. Zhang Qingsheng still needed to work hard. His pursuit of invincibility was not to be invincible in a one-on-one fight, but invincibility when facing the world. If he could destroy the entire world alone, then he would be truly invincible. The Great Jing dynasty was not the only dynasty in the world. The world was vast and the martial arts were boundless. God knew how many experts there were. Perhaps if he cultivated to become an immortal, he would be invincible. As Zhang Qingsheng thought, he began to cultivate the Jade Pure Meridian Cutting Needle. At that moment, the door of the nearby house was pushed open and Hua Jiangxin walked out. She had changed into a Taoist robe and her long hair was draped over her shoulders. She had a beautiful face. Even though she was not devastatingly beautiful, she was still a top-notch beauty. Her left arm was wrapped in a piece of cloth. It seemed it would be difficult for her arm to recover in a short period of time. When she saw Zhang Qingsheng, she was slightly lost in thought. This was the first time she had seriously observed Zhang Qingsheng in broad daylight. The first time she saw Zhang Qingsheng, she was stunned. However, the current Zhang Qingsheng had the aura of an enlightened expert. Under the sunlight, he looked as if he would ascend and become an immortal at any time. Hua Jiangxin suddenly saw a white snake on Zhang Qingsheng's shoulder. The white snake seemed to have sensed her gaze and crawled down its body towards her. Seeing this snake, Hua Jiangxin had goosebumps. She was most afraid of snakes in her life. White Dragon, don't approach her in the future. Zhang Qingsheng's voice sounded. He felt Hua Jiangxin's fear. When White Dragon heard that, it could only turn its head and look at Hua Jiangxin from time to time, which made Hua Jiangxin feel absurd. This snake was human? Zhang Qingsheng did not open his eyes and said, recover first. Once your injuries are healed, I will teach you how to become stronger. Hua Jiangxin nodded respectfully. The sky was blue and cloudless for tens of thousands of miles. There was a large river flowing between the mountains and a huge ship was moving forward. Dozens of wooden ships followed it, and all of them were filled with white-robed guards and imperial guards. Zhang Yuan, who was dressed in a dragon robe, stood at the bow. The wind blew against his white temples. A white-robed guard leaped onto the deck and quickly came behind him. He half knelt and handed over a roll of letters with both hands. Zhang Yuan raised his hand and with his back facing the white-robed guards, he sucked the letter into his palm and began to read it. After he finished reading it, he condensed true qi in his palms and minced the letter into pieces before letting it fall into the river. Zhang Yuan put his hands behind his back but said nothing. The white-robed guard waited for a while before leaving quietly. Soon after, the crown prince, Zhang Qian, and the second prince, Zhang Ming, came and bowed behind Zhang Yuan. "Father, I made a bet with my second brother. He said that the martial arts recruitment order you issued could attract powerful figures in the martial arts world. I bet that it would not work. At most, it would attract many top experts." Zhang Qian chuckled. He was in a good mood. Zhang Yuan turned around and looked at him with a smile. "Oh? Do you think I am not worthy of the attention of the martial arts world?" Zhang Qian shook his head and said, "Of course not. It's just that if an existence of the martial arts world enters the court, the martial arts world will reject them. Compared to status and salary, they care more about their status in the martial arts world." Zhang Ming snorted and said, "The great Jing dynasty is not the Chu dynasty. We have the ambition to devour the world. This is only the beginning. When the great Jing annexes other dynasties, the great Jing dynasty can also expand its territory. They should join us as soon as possible so that their status will be higher in the future." Zhang Qian replied, "That's a fantasy. Taking everything into consideration, it's very hard for anyone to dare to gamble on us." Seeing that the two brothers were about to start a fight again, Zhang Yuan said helplessly, "All right, you're giving me a headache." The two brothers immediately shut their mouths, not daring to say anything else. Zhang Yuan stared at them and said, "One of you is rational and clear-headed, but underestimate the strength of a martial artist. The other is valiant, but is too arrogant. If your strengths can combine together, that would be great." Zhang Qian smiled and said, "Father is right. Speaking of which, seventh brother has brought together our strengths. Even though he is young, he has trained in the sacred land. When he returned last year, he had matured a lot." Zhang Ming frowned. No one knew what he was thinking. Zhang Yuan turned his head and looked ahead. Little Seven is good, but he is too young. It is impossible for him to have his turn on the throne. Zhang Qian could no longer smile. He did not understand what his father meant. On the other hand, Zhang Ming became excited and said, "Father, since we established our own country and the martial arts world has recovered, those hidden sects have successively opened their doors to accept disciples. Next month, at Jiangnan's Pine Lake, a supreme martial artist will appear. Father, are you willing to go and take a look?" Zhang Qian frowned and said, "No, it's too dangerous to gather all the experts in the martial arts world." Zhang Yuan stroked his beard and said with a smile, "I am the emperor, the great emperor who unified the 13 prefectures. How can I be afraid of the martial arts world? Let's go to Pine Lake." When Zhang Ming heard that, he smiled even more proudly. After 2 months, autumn and winter were about to arrive. The plague in the capital had also completely disappeared. In the 18th year of the founding of the dynasty, a plague broke out in the capital. You have lived on the mountain for a long time and avoided a calamity. You have obtained a survival reward miscellaneous skill, talisman technique. A line of words suddenly appeared before Zhang Qingsheng's eyes. He did not think much of it and directly began to inherit the art of talismans. Talisman techniques could imprint spells into paper talismans as incantations. This was a pretty good spell. In the future, when he made magic talismans and handed them over to his subordinates, they could still save their life with it. Not bad, not bad. After Zhang Qingsheng inherited the memories of the talisman technique, he stood up and walked out of the house to the courtyard. The Devil Lord was training under the tree while Hua Jiangxin was training her sword not far away. Their injuries were about to recover, thanks to Zhang Qingsheng's medicinal pills. Seeing Zhang Qingsheng appear, Hua Jiangxin retracted her sword and quickly walked to him before bowing. The Devil Lord also opened his eyes and rushed over to salute. His eyes were filled with anticipation. Even though he had not learned much after spending 2 months with him, he could sense that Zhang Qingsheng was indeed extraordinary. Even the snake he raised was very human-like. Zhang Qingsheng said, "Since your injuries have healed, from today onwards, I will teach each of you a unique skill." Hearing this, the two of them thanked him in pleasant surprise. Zhang Qingsheng decided to impart the overlord body of Zhuan to the Devil Lord and the Jade Pure Meridian cutting needle to Hua Jiangxin. As for the immortal cultivation technique, it was temporarily impossible for him to pass it over for the time being. He did not want to see the act of starving the master to death. 7 days later, Zhang Qingsheng was done imparting. The rest required them to work hard on their own, as he still had to spend his time on his own cultivation. Cultivating forces was only the second goal. The first goal must be one's own cultivation. The 5th level of the Dao technique was imperative and could not be delayed. He could easily defeat a heaven or rival realm expert on the 4th level, but he would not slack off. Another half a month passed. When Chen Li came to visit, Zhang Qingshan told the Devil Lord to hide in his room and not show his face. Zhang Qingshan, Hua Jiangxin, and Chen Li gathered in the room. Chen Li's expression was weak. When he saw that Hua Jiangxin had recovered, he could not help but smile, but it was a forced smile. His Majesty is about to return to the capital. Even though His Majesty has been acting ridiculously in recent years, the might of a true dragon still exists. Other than investigating the people's feelings and pursuing immortality, His Majesty has actually roped in a new supreme expert of the martial arts world. The supreme expert of the martial arts world will follow His Majesty back to the capital, so we don't have to worry about the attack of the Devil Sect in the future. Speaking of the supreme expert of the martial arts world, Chen Li was very excited. The strength of the Devil Sect had deeply stimulated him. If it were not for the protection of the Chen family, he would have died long ago. Zhang Qingshan asked curiously, the supreme expert of the martial arts world. Is he very strong? How many moves can the Devil Lord withstand against him? How many moves? The martial arts grandmaster is naturally stronger than the Devil Lord, but speaking of how many moves is too humiliating for the Devil Lord. Chen Li said helplessly as he looked at Hua Jiangxin. Hua Jiangxin nodded and said, the Devil Lord is indeed powerful. Taoist Master Qingshan never leaves the mountain, so it's normal that he doesn't know. Chapter 19 Too godly. From Chen Li's point of view, Hua Jiangxin was the only one who had fought against the Devil Lord, and she knew how powerful the Devil Lord was. He trusted Hua Jiangxin very much. Hua Jiangxin said that the Devil Lord was repelled by an old beggar, so he reported it truthfully. Chen Li sighed and said, the white-robed guards have been investigating for several months. It's rare to see an old beggar who could repel the Devil Lord. It's either the leader of the beggar sect or a crazy Taoist who has gone wild. Both of them are elusive and hard to find. Zhang Qingshan asked, that's it? So many people had died, and they had caused such a huge commotion. It was ridiculous for it to end just like that. Chen Li shook his head and said, it's just that the matter has ended. When His Majesty comes back, he will certainly question me. I have resigned from my position as a member of the government and was transferred to the revenue department as a servant. Even though I was demoted, it can be considered as saving my life. Zhang Qingshan nodded and did not continue asking. Chen Li looked at Hua Jiangxin and said, you have two options. First, I can send you out of the capital right now. Second, when His Majesty comes back to question you, you can return safely if Eunuch Li and the leader of the white-robed guards are executed. Hua Jiangxin shook her head and said, your two paths will make me visit heaven earlier. Thank you for your kindness. Chen Li was silent and revealed a guilty expression. It was his invitation that caused Hua Jiangxin to fall into such a predicament, but he could not resolve it. Then you intend to? Chen Li asked. Hua Jiangxin said, I will follow Taoist Master Qingshan from now on. You don't have to worry anymore. As for the white-robed guards, I don't care anymore. Right now, she was studying the Jade Pure Meridian cutting needle every day and only wanted to become stronger. That night, the Devil Sect chased after her, but no one could help her. She did not want to experience that powerlessness and despair again. Chen Li looked at Zhang Qingshan. Zhang Qingshan smiled and said, let her stay. As long as she doesn't go down the mountain, nothing will happen. Chen Li felt that it was reasonable and nodded in agreement. As Hua Jiangxin was by their side, he did not express his depression to Zhang Qingshan like he did in the past. He left not long after. After Chen Li left, Zhang Qingshan asked, which faction do you think Chen Li belongs to? Hua Jiangxin pondered for a moment and said, he cares about the people and is a person of integrity. He only recognizes reason and disdains factional conflicts. He does not belong to any faction. How did you meet? Back then, when he became the top scholar, His Majesty had high hopes for him and sent me to secretly protect him for several years. Because of some coincidences, we became familiar with each other. Hua Jiangxin answered. She was curious about what Zhang Qingshan wanted to do, but she did not dare to ask. For such an expert to reside in the capital, it was definitely not as simple as cultivating. Zhang Qingshan no longer asked and waved for her to leave. Then, he cultivated in his room. His next goal was to reach the 5th level of the Dao technique. After reaching the 5th floor, he would meet with Heaven, a rival realm expert in the palace, and carry out the bold plan in his heart. When fighting against the Emperor, one could not fight recklessly and could only focus on cultivation. At most, he would make him suffer to death. Zhang Qingshan silently reminded himself not to be arrogant at any time. He had to be absolutely confident before he attacked. In the resplendent hall, Zhang Yuan sat on the dragon throne with an imposing manner. With the crown on his head, he exuded the domineering aura of an emperor. All the civil and military officials in the hall lowered their heads, not daring to look at him. Even the princes were the same. Eunuch Li stood diagonally beneath Zhang Yuan and bowed as if everything had nothing to do with him. Zhang Yuan sneered and said, "Why? Are all of you mute? More than 200 people have died in the city, and one member of the white-robed guards has gone missing? Can you be any more ridiculous?" The Minister of Justice, Yang Che, went forward and knelt down. With tears in his eyes, he cried and said, "Your Majesty, 73 members of my Yang family have died. Even my brother. Please make a decision." Another civil official also walked out and knelt down as he shouted, "My Hong family has lost 102 people. There must be someone behind the devil sect." During that period of time, the white-robed guards disappeared and the imperial guards pretended to be dead. It was useless to beg them. There must be an important official giving orders behind this. "Your Majesty, investigate carefully." Soon after, other officials knelt down. The second prince, Zhang Ming, frowned, and so did the crown prince, Zhang Qian. Zhang Ming's backer was the Hong family, and Zhang Qian's backer was the Yang family. They had left the capital with the emperor, and their respective backers had been attacked. They felt that it was the influence of the other princes. Zhang Yuan snorted, and it sounded like a dragon's roar. Everyone felt as if a hammer had struck their hearts, and the noise in the hall stopped abruptly. He slowly stood up and his true chi stirred his dragon robe. His aura was visible to the naked eye, as if a translucent dragon was winding around his body. Everyone became nervous, and the generals were secretly shocked. Mangekyō, who had left Longkai Temple, was also in the hall. He was also shocked. The emperor has such power. Mangekyō thought in shock. As the martial arts top scholar, he thought highly of his martial arts skills and looked down on the princes and the emperor. However, after seeing him today, he realized that the emperor who defeated the vast world was not an ordinary man. Zhang Yuan glanced at everyone and said in a cold voice, "So many people have died in the imperial city. I want the same number of heads from you." Everyone felt apprehensive when they heard that. Zhang Yuan really dared to kill people. No matter how high-ranking the official was, they could be beheaded. "Summon Zhong Tanwu." Zhang Yuan spoke again. Eunuch Li immediately raised his head and repeated his words in a loud voice. After the eunuchs outside the hall heard him, they repeated his words one after another. Zhong Tanwu was the current supreme expert in the martial arts world. He suppressed all the heroes in the world and reached the peak of the martial arts world with absolute martial arts. The civil and military officials looked at each other and turned to look outside the hall. Outside the throne room was a flight of hundreds of stairs, and below it was the imperial gate of the inner city and a huge martial arts plaza. A figure rushed over it like a ghost. He seemed to be constantly teleporting as he walked dozens of feet with each step. In less than 5 breaths, he entered the hall. After entering the hall, his footsteps slowed down. It was no longer as strange as before. Instead, he strolled forward like a mortal. He came to the hall and bowed. He did not kneel. Zhong Tanwu was dressed in a white robe. He had white hair, white eyebrows, and a white beard. He had a strong physique and there was arrogance between his brows. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the civil and military officials on both sides. Zhang Qian frowned. He did not like his gaze. Zhang Ming stared at Zhong Tanwu passionately. From today onwards, the Sky Martial Supervisor will be established. Officials of the 5th rank and above can elect 2 disciples to enter the Sky Martial Supervisor to train in martial arts. Other than imparting martial arts, the Sky Martial Supervisor also has to investigate the case of the Devil Sect. SKT Martial Supervisor, you will only listen to my orders. Zhang Yuan spoke haltingly. A great deal of power fell on Zhong Tanwu, causing the civil and military officials to look at him with jealousy and worry. Zhong Tanwu cupped his hands and said, "I accept your order." In the 19th year after the founding of the dynasty, just as the new year ended, a bloodbath was set off in the capital. 200 high-ranking officials were killed on the streets to appease the public's resentment. When Chen Li visited Zhang Qingsheng and mentioned this matter, he was extremely excited. He called His Majesty's dragon mighty, but the only pity was that Eunuch Li was still alive. He even told him about the Sky Martial Supervisor. Right now, the Sky Martial Supervisor was the most terrifying existence in the capital because they were the Emperor's blades. They were as powerful as generals in the dynasty. After they were convicted by the Emperor, they wanted to escape, but they were captured by Zhong Tanwu. It was said that they could not even withstand a single move. Zhang Qingsheng was extremely curious about Zhong Tanwu. He wondered how powerful this supreme martial artist was. Other than that, Chen Li also brought along a batch of medicinal ingredients, including the last ingredient to detoxify Taoist Master King Su's poison. Speaking of which, it was strange. Taoist Master King Su was inflicted with the poison of the Devil Sect, but even the Devil Lord could not cure it. When they developed this poison, no one could cure it even if they tried to. After Chen Li left, Zhang Qingsheng began to refine pills. He only used an ordinary small cauldron to refine pills in the courtyard. The Devil Lord walked out of the room and came to Zhang Qingsheng's side. He and Hueco watched him refine pills together. The art of concocting elixirs had always been a legend in the martial arts world. Most people concocted elixirs like a doctor burning medicine. There was nothing mysterious about it. Zhang Qingsheng used his spiritual power to control the fire. All the medicinal ingredients in the medicinal cauldron automatically condensed into a medicinal pill. Moreover, it was suspended in midair without touching the bottom. This scene made the Devil Lord and Hueco swallow their saliva. Too amazing. When he had nothing better to do, Zhang Qingsheng liked to concoct pills for fun. His alchemy skills had reached great success, so he succeeded in one try. After he was done, he went to look for Taoist Master Kingsu. Along the way, the disciples bowed to him in respect. When they arrived at Taoist Master Kingsu's courtyard, Zhang Qingsheng met his master. Ever since he brought the Devil Lord up the mountain, Taoist Master Kingsu hid himself in the courtyard and never went out again. The disciples who usually delivered food were the only people who could see him. Taoist Master Kingsu was still seated under the tree. He did not train and merely stared at the old tree in a daze. "Master, I have made an antidote that will definitely cure your poison." Zhang Qingsheng smiled and waited for Taoist Master Kingsu's surprised and moved expression. However, Taoist Master Kingsu was expressionless and did not even turn his head. Could it be that he had gone stupid from the poison? Zhang Qingsheng was worried and took 2 steps forward. "Give me the antidote." Taoist Master Kingsu raised his hand and reached out to Zhang Qingsheng. Zhang Qingsheng immediately took out the antidote and muttered in his heart, "So arrogant." He did not care so much. In any case, it was Taoist Master Kingsu who saved him when he was young and gave him a place to live. Perhaps it was all the Emperor's scheme, but when he was betrayed, he could tell that some people really wanted to kill him. Taoist Master Kingsu took the antidote and consumed it without any hesitation. After he consumed the antidote, he stood up and turned to Zhang Qingsheng. "Disciple, I am preparing to leave the mountain." "Leave the mountain?" Zhang Qingsheng was stunned. Eldest senior brother had run away, second senior brother had run away, and now master was also running away? Just as he was about to speak, Taoist Master Kingsu shook his head and said, "I wanted to protect you for 5 years, but you are strong enough now. Even the people in the palace might not be able to take you down. I am relieved. It is time for me to leave." Zhang Qingsheng frowned and asked, "Where are you going?" Taoist Master Kingsu answered, "To my home." With that said, he walked forward and brushed past Zhang Qingsheng. "I'll leave Longkai Temple to you from now on." After Taoist Master Kingsu said that, he disappeared from the corridor. Zhang Qingsheng frowned. This old man wanted to escape? He hastily chased after him. No matter how he persuaded him, Taoist Master Kingsu merely continued forward. When he reached the entrance of the mountain, he stopped and watched as Taoist Master Kingsu descended the mountain. He left just like that? He did not even pack his things? Zhang Qingsheng did not know how to explain to the other disciples, so he simply returned to his courtyard and focused on his cultivation. 2 days later, people from the imperial court came. Eunuch Li was escorted all the way to Zhang Qingsheng's courtyard by a group of imperial guards. The one leading the way was King Ku, followed by many disciples, Hueco and the Devil Lord hid in the room while Zhang Qingsheng walked to Eunuch Li. Eunuch Li raised his hands, and there was an imperial decree in them. He smiled and nodded at Zhang Qingsheng. Then, he pulled open the imperial decree and said, "According to the Emperor's edict, Taoist Master Kingsu is getting on in years and is no longer capable of serving as the abbot of Longkai Temple. From today onwards, Taoist priest Qingsheng will be the abbot of Longkai Temple and enjoy a 4th-grade salary from the imperial court. He will also be in charge of the incense yard." Chapter 20 Immortal in Dreams, Alchemy and Cultivation. Taoist Master Qingsheng, accept the decree. Eunuch Li handed the imperial decree to Zhang Qingsheng with a smile. Even though Zhang Qingsheng was puzzled, he still accepted the decree. Then, Eunuch Li turned around and left. The disciples of Longkai Temple surrounded him one after another. "Second senior brother, how did you become an abbot? Where's master? What's going on?" "Congratulations to second senior brother for becoming a Taoist master." The disciples talked at once. Some were puzzled, some were worried, some were excited, and some were envious. Zhang Qingsheng felt helpless. He did not expect that the change of the abbot of Longkai Temple would make such a huge commotion. Zhang Qingsheng noticed his eldest senior sister, Mangekyō, who was not far away. Mangekyō was also stunned and stood rooted on the spot. He immediately walked over and said, "Senior sister, may I have a word with you?" Mangekyō took a deep breath and nodded in agreement. The other disciples did not dare to catch up as they were worried that their senior brothers and sisters would have conflicts. After all, it had been their senior sister who had been in charge of the affairs of the Taoist temple all these years. They did not expect senior brother Qingshan, who had never done anything, to become a Taoist master. The two of them arrived at an uninhabited courtyard. Zhang Qingshan was the first to speak. Senior sister, I didn't expect master to suddenly give up his position to me. You watched me grow up and know that I don't have any management experience. In the future, you will still be in charge of the affairs of Longkai Temple. What do you think? Mangekyō Wang frowned and asked, where did master go? Zhang Qingshan shook his head and said, I don't know. Mangekyō Wang stared at him for a while before she finally sighed and said, all right. Zhang Qingshan smiled and said, then thank you, senior sister. If you encounter any trouble on normal days, you can look for me. My martial arts skills are passable, and I also have some medical skills. Of course, it would be best if you could manage the internal affairs. My mind is focused on my cultivation. Mangekyō Wang could not help but laugh and said angrily, all right, I understand. The two of them chatted for a while before they left. At this point, the Longkai Temple had changed owners, and the abbot was Taoist Master Qingshan. When they returned to the courtyard, Hueco, who was cultivating the jade pure meridian cutting needle, came over and asked curiously, Taoist Master, why doesn't Eunuch Li want you to kneel? The emperor declared that not kneeling to receive the decree was a capital crime. Zhang Qingshan smiled and said, perhaps it's because of Longkai Temple. My master did not kneel in front of his majesty. Hueco felt that it was reasonable and did not ask further. In this year, Zhang Qingshan's greatest change was to become a Taoist master. Fortunately, with Mangekyō Wang around, his days did not change much. Every day, other than cultivating, he taught Wan Li and Minayu. As for Hueco and the Devil Lord, both of them were adults. After learning the practice method, he no longer cared about them. Due to their young age, the two young Taoists, Wan Li and Minayu, had not found Hueco and the Devil Lord. Half a year later, Zhang Qingshan let the Devil Lord go down the mountain. He needed the Devil Lord to control the Devil sect. Hueco stood by Zhang Qingshan's side and asked, do you really trust him? Zhang Qingshan said, you don't have to worry. He knows what to choose. After the incident in the capital, more than 200 civil and military officials were beheaded, and the Great Jing dynasty set off a crazy search for the Devil sect. Now, the Devil sect was living even worse than before. Evidently, the aristocrats had abandoned the Devil sect. In such a situation, it was impossible for the Devil Lord to rely on them. He would only be hostile to them. Zhang Qingshan turned around and walked to the center of the courtyard. There was a small tree planted here, a pear tree. On the tree was a white snake. It was White Dragon. He began to tease White Dragon. White Dragon was rubbed around by him. It enjoyed it very much and did not resist at all. Seeing this, Hueco felt goosebumps and immediately walked away. It had been 20 years since the founding of the dynasty, and the country was peaceful. There was no storm, and the construction of the canal was more than halfway done. In spring, the flowers and trees on Longkai Mountain welcomed vitality, but no guests went up the mountain that day. In the courtyard, Zhang Qingshan opened his eyes and gave Hueco a look. Hueco immediately hid in the house. After a year of cultivating, his spiritual force had doubled, and he was getting closer and closer to the 5th level. If he faced the Devil Lord again, he would not even have to personally take action. He could kill him with the Imperial Sword technique. Zhang Qingshan had only faced one Heaven Arrival Realm expert. By using the Devil Lord, the weakest Heaven Arrival Realm expert, as base for his estimation, he guessed that the head of punishment and that Heaven Arrival Realm expert in the palace should be 100 times stronger than the Devil Lord. It was safer to compete like this. Even though he was 100 times stronger than the Devil Lord, he still did not pay any attention to him. However, he still wanted to break through to the 5th level of the Dao technique. After a while, footsteps sounded. It was King Ku. King Ku excitedly said, Senior brother Qingshan, the Emperor is here and wants to see you. Hurry up and go. He is about to arrive at the Clear Heart Palace Hall. Eldest senior sister is currently receiving him. Emperor? The day had finally come. Zhang Qingshan did not hesitate and immediately walked away. He and King Ku went to the front of the Clear Heart Palace Hall first. King Ku stood on one side. There were no other disciples in the courtyard. Very soon, Zhang Yuan came in with Mangekyō Wang. The royal guards behind him quickly surrounded the courtyard and guarded it. Zhang Yuan raised his hand, and Mangekyō Wang immediately stopped and no longer entered the hall. She shot a look at King Ku, and he immediately left. When he passed by Zhang Yuan, he even knelt and kowtowed. Zhang Yuan ignored King Ku and looked at Zhang Qingshan. The young Taoist master wore a clean Taoist robe with a famous sword on his waist and a horsetail whisk in his hand. He had the aura of an expert. Zhang Yuan revealed a satisfied smile and walked to Zhang Qingshan. Zhang Qingshan bowed and said, "Greetings, Your Majesty." Zhang Yuan chuckled and said, "Since it's a greeting, why don't you kneel?" Zhang Qingshan hesitated. Just as he was hesitating about how to answer, Zhang Yuan grabbed his hand and smiled. "Forget it. There's no need to kneel. Let's enter the hall and have a chat." Just like that, he pulled Zhang Qingshan into the Clear Heart Palace Hall. This action left Zhang Qingshan in a trance. This was his biological father in this life. Zhang Yuan must know that he was his son, but he did not know that Zhang Qingshan knew about it. After entering the hall, Zhang Yuan burned incense with a devout expression and muttered something. After Zhang Yuan finished reciting, the two of them sat on the futon and Zhang Yuan began to tell the story of his time with Taoist Master King Su. Zhang Qingshan listened attentively and felt bored. As one got older, they would be nostalgic and hope that they would not be like this in the future. After chatting for a long time, Zhang Yuan stared at Zhang Qingshan again. He sized him up carefully and praised, "Qingshan, before Taoist Master King Su left, he specially instructed me to take good care of you. It's rare for me to come here, so if you have anything you want, I will try my best to satisfy you." The eagerness in Zhang Yuan's eyes made Zhang Qingshan uncomfortable. However, Zhang Yuan had mistreated him. Plus, if there were benefits to be had, it would be a waste if he did not want it. If he did not want it, no matter how guilty Zhang Yuan felt, he would not return the position of crown prince to him. Zhang Qingshan said, "I have done some research on alchemy, and I hope to obtain all kinds of medicinal ingredients, preferably seeds, as I can plant them on the mountain, the more the better." "Alchemy?" Zhang Yuan's eyes lit up and he asked, "Can you let me take a look at your medicinal pill?" This emperor was obsessed with the immortal Tao, and he had been looking for pills all over the world. Naturally, he was tempted when he heard the word pill. Zhang Qingshan took out a beauty pill and said, "This is a beauty pill that can allow one's youth to last forever." Zhang Yuan took it and carefully appreciated it. The more he looked at it, the happier he was. He smiled and said, "I agree. I will accept this pill and give it to my empress." Zhang Qingshan could not refuse. In any case, it was for his mother. Zhang Yuan played with the beauty pill and suppressed his excitement. "This pill contains a faint trace of true qi. No, it is more profound than ordinary true qi. It is absolutely not an ordinary pill. It is more outstanding than all the medicinal pills I have ever seen." "Who taught you this?" Zhang Qingshan smiled and said, "It was taught to me by an immortal in my dream." Zhang Yuan widened his eyes and asked, "Could it be that your martial arts were also taught by that immortal in your dream?" Since ancient times, how many famous people had carried the color of myths? There were countless stories in their dreams. Zhang Qingshan nodded. Zhang Yuan was completely ignited and pulled him to ask about the immortals. Zhang Qingshan was ambiguous. He said that he could not remember the immortal in his dream and only remembered what the immortal had taught him. This made Zhang Yuan believe it even more. Zhang Qingshan pretended to hesitate and said, "Your Majesty, we hit it off at first sight. Even my master do not know about this. My master thought that an expert was silently guiding me, but that's not the case. I hope your Majesty can hide it for me." Zhang Yuan's expression became gratified and he said, "Good, good, good. I will never mention this to anyone, but I." Zhang Qingshan immediately understood and said, "I've heard of your Majesty's pursuit. I haven't obtained the art of longevity for the time being, so I don't dare to deceive your Majesty. However, I can concoct some longevity pills. When I have all the medicinal ingredients, I will concoct them for your Majesty." "Good, good, good." Zhang Yuan smiled from ear to ear and patted the back of Zhang Qingshan's hand. The two of them became closer. After that, Zhang Yuan asked about Zhang Qingshan's life when he was young and chatted for an hour before he left. In front of the mountain gate, Zhang Qingshan looked at Zhang Yuan, who would turn back and wave at him every 3 steps. He revealed a smile, but his heart was rather complicated. The emperor's thoughts were hard to guess. He even suspected if his previous guess was true. Perhaps Zhang Yuan had no choice. However, Zhang Qingshan did not waver. His goal would not change. He wanted to take revenge on everyone who had harmed him. The assassinations over the years were not an act. As for the throne, only I can decide it. The emperor's attitude also allowed the Longkai Temple disciples to breathe a sigh of relief. Even Mangekyō Shuang was full of smiles. After Taoist Master King Su left, they had been worried that His Majesty would neglect Longkai Temple. It seemed like they had worried too much. As long as His Majesty's favor was still there, the Longkai Temple would not fall. At noon the next day, a group of imperial guards carried a few large chests up the mountain. Other than ripe medicinal ingredients, there were also many seeds. Zhang Qingshan asked Mangekyō Shuang to lead the disciples to plant these medicinal ingredients and specially reminded them of the preciousness of the medicinal ingredients. This made Mangekyō Shuang nervous and personally took care of the planting. He did not only want these medicinal ingredients to help Zhang Yuan make a longevity pill, but he also wanted to produce a pill that could increase his cultivation level. How could one rely only just on their efforts for cultivation? The stimulation of external objects was also very important. Other than cultivating, Zhang Qingsheng began to study alchemy. Alchemy was only a skill and did not come with a pill formula. What's more, there was also no formula for cultivation pills in the spring and autumn medical book, so he could only figure it out himself. White Dragon had become his test subject. If anything went wrong, he could use rejuvenation to treat it. In the first month, White Dragon consumed 3 types of medicinal pills. The third time, the snake's body swelled and it almost exploded. Fortunately, Zhang Qingsheng used his spiritual energy to deflate it in time. In the second month, White Dragon consumed 2 types of medicinal pills. Even though there were no abnormalities, its body had become thicker and was about to turn into a python. In the next 2 months, the White Dragon consumed 4 types of medicinal pills. The 4th medicinal pill finally allowed the spiritual force in its body to increase. It worked. Chapter 21 Breaking Through the 5th Level, Mortals Kowtowing to Immortals, 1. As White Dragon had been nourished by Zhang Qingsheng's spiritual energy before it was born, a trace of spiritual energy had long been nurtured in its body. However, its intelligence was still shallow and it did not know how to cultivate. At most, it could only rely on its breathing to absorb the essence of the sun and moon, so its cultivation growth was slow. Since it could increase one's spiritual force, it should have the same effect for Zhang Qingsheng. Zhang Qingsheng mustered his courage and consumed the remaining medicinal pill. The medicinal pill melted in his mouth and turned into a heat source that flowed down his throat and into his bones. Awesome! Zhang Qingsheng revealed a look of joy. White Dragon beside him came over and stuck out its snake tongue, as if it wanted more, but Zhang Qingsheng pushed it away. This pill shall be named the Spirit-Increasing Pill. Zhang Qingsheng happily thought. Then, he memorized the medicinal ingredients for the pill and recorded them into a prescription. This was the first cultivation medicinal pill he had developed. The medicinal ingredients were not rare, but they were not easy to obtain. He still had to rely on the emperor to collect them. Zhang Qingsheng also concocted a bottle of medicinal pills to nourish one's body and increase one's vitality. Then, he handed it to the emperor one by one. Hua Jiangxin had also witnessed the various changes in White Dragon, but she did not dare to disturb him, fearing that she would also become a test subject. Spring and autumn alternated. Zhang Yuan would take the time to come to Longkai Temple every month. With such frequent visits, the status of Longkai Temple had also risen. More and more influential people came to burn incense, and the incense money of Longkai Temple far exceeded the previous years. With more money, the lives of the disciples improved. The disciples all knew one thing. Even though the Taoist master was not in charge, he could speak to the emperor and obtain his favor. That was his greatest ability. In the blink of an eye. Another year passed. 21 years after the founding of the dynasty. As the emperor no longer pursued immortal pills, he spent more time dealing with the state affairs. The economy of the Great Jing dynasty continued to rise, and it was not even dragged down by the construction of the canal. Other than managing the internal affairs, the war against the outside world also played a huge role. The Great Jing attacked ancient Han and continuously annexed its territory, harvesting all kinds of resources, causing the unity of the Great Jing dynasty to increase. There had been dozens of dynasties in this continent. In the vast history of the continent, the emperor was always the most dazzling existence. As the founding emperor of a dynasty, Zhang Yuan's historical status was no longer low. The scholars originally thought that he would become more and more muddle-headed after he became obsessed with the immortal Tao. Unexpectedly, he suddenly came to a realization and all kinds of poems praising the emperor began to become popular. The spring rain continued. King Ku came to visit Zhang Qingsheng and revealed his intentions. He was prepared to lead a group of disciples down the mountain to train. At the same time, he would collect orphans and nurture new disciples for Longkai Temple. This was an old tradition of Longkai Temple. Be more careful. There are 2 talismans here. When you encounter an enemy you cannot defeat, infuse your true chi into them and aim the talismans at the enemy. Remember, you are not to use them easily. Zhang Qingsheng took out 2 yellow talismans from his sleeve. The talisman paper were sent by Chen Li, and he had inscribed them with his spiritual force. For the sake of making them look special, he even scribbled on the talismans. King Ku took the 2 talismans with a puzzled expression and thought to himself, "Senior brother, why are you getting more and more mysterious?" Even though that was what he thought, he still carefully placed it away. Zhang Qingsheng was extremely mysterious in his eyes, and he even raised a white python that could understand humans. Perhaps this talisman was really useful. After King Ku left, Zhang Qingsheng continued to cultivate. In the past year, the disciples had become accustomed to White Dragon. It could freely wander around Lonkai Mountain and never hurt anyone. Most importantly, it was a vegetarian, making it popular among disciples. There were even pilgrims who saw it. After knowing that it was raised by Taoist Master Qingshan, they were no longer afraid. Under the deliberate influence of the disciples, the name of White Dragon gradually spread throughout the capital. There was a snake in Lonkai Temple named White Dragon, and it understood humans. Hua Jiangxin had followed Zhang Qingshan for so long that he had completely mastered the Jade Pure Meridian cutting needle. Zhang Qingshan had even taught her the 9 seeking heavenly dragon steps, and her strength had advanced by leaps and bounds. According to her, she felt that she had hopes of reaching the heavenly arrival realm. From the looks of it, reaching the heavenly arrival realm did not require top-notch internal skills. On the 10th day of King Ku's departure, Zhang Qingshan finally welcomed an opportunity to break through. He had to consume a spirit-increasing pill every month in exchange for an advanced breakthrough. He sat in the room and circulated his energy. His spiritual energy surged and his Taoist robe and long hair fluttered. White Dragon lying on the windowsill and basking in the sun turned its head, its snake eyes suffused with a faint glint. Something's wrong. Zhang Qingshan suddenly frowned and felt inexplicably uneasy. Her breakthrough was smooth, and there were no problems with his cultivation. So, how could he be uneasy? He circulated his energy nervously and became even more careful. He did not dare to be careless at all. At the same time, above Lonkai Temple, the white clouds in the blue sky gradually darkened before gathering towards Lonkai Mountain. The disciples of Lonkai Temple thought that it was going to rain, so they welcomed the devotees to the hall to hide from the rain. The citizens in the capital also noticed the phenomenon of Lonkai Mountain. The huge capital was shrouded in dark clouds, and it was still noon. Such a phenomenon was rather spectacular, but the citizens only looked at it and did not think much about it. However, boom, a bolt of lightning suddenly descended from the sky and struck the eaves of Zhang Qingshan's house, causing rubble to fly everywhere. Zhang Qingshan opened his eyes. Sensing the abnormality in the outside world, an idea surfaced in his mind. Could it be tribulation transcendence? Zhang Qingshan immediately stood up and flashed to the roof. A strong wind blew and the dark clouds in the sky turned into thunderclouds. The sea of clouds churned and formed a huge and terrifying vortex. Lightning and thunder faintly intertwined and a great heavenly might radiated. When he came to the eaves, the uneasiness in his heart suddenly disappeared. At that moment, he understood that he had to transcend the tribulation to advance to the 5th level of the Tao technique. He could not escape it. Once he escaped it, the uneasiness in his heart would turn into an inner demon that would interfere with his future cultivation. He had to transcend this tribulation. Zhang Qingshan's gaze became firm. He directly meditated on the eaves and his legs were floating half a meter above from the eaves. Spiritual energy surrounded his body and his robes fluttered in the wind. Hua Jiangxin was alarmed by the thunder. She pushed open the door and came out into the courtyard. When she looked up, she saw Zhang Qingshan in midair. She widened her beautiful eyes as if she had seen a ghost. He was floating in the air? Could this be a trick of the Devil Lord? Boom! Another bolt of lightning struck down. This time, it was aimed at Zhang Qingshan, but it was blocked by his spiritual force and dissipated. This scene shocked Hua Jiangxin. Before she could react, bolts of lightning struck down, all aimed at Zhang Qingshan. Zhang Qingshan used his spiritual power to protect his body and formed a protective shield to withstand the lightning bolts. The power of the lightning became stronger and quickly formed an indiscriminate bombardment. Even in the day, lightning could be seen. Lightning could be seen on the top of Lonkai Mountain in every corner of the capital, including the palace. The lightning struck in the same direction and formed a conical shape. Even from afar, it was a spectacular sight. What's that? What terrifying lightning? Could it be that something has appeared in Lonkai Temple? Rumor has it that the new Taoist master of Lonkai Temple is young and smart. He even raised a white python that understands human nature. Could he be the reincarnation of an immortal? I'm not sure. From the looks of it, Lonkai Temple looks to be in danger, right? This is strange. This old man has lived for 70 years and experienced 2 dynasties, but I have never seen such a phenomenon. The citizens in the capital were in a heated discussion. Even the high-ranking officials and nobles walked out of their rooms one after another to look at this phenomenon. Within the palace, Zhang Yuan stood in front of the throne room with his hands behind his back. As he looked at the lightning around Lonkai Mountain, his eyes were filled with excitement. When Eunuch Li walked over, the excitement in his eyes disappeared and was replaced by an unfathomable depth that was similar to an ancient well. Eunuch Li came to him and carefully said, "Your Majesty, I'm afraid everyone in the capital can see this phenomenon. How should we deal with it?" Zhang Yuan casually said, "Is the weather something humans can deal with?" "No, I'm worried that Lonkai Temple will be damaged. This is a Taoist temple personally designated by His Majesty. We'll talk about it when it's damaged." Zhang Yuan answered casually as he stared at Longkai Temple. Eunuch Li did not dare to ask any more questions. He turned around and looked at Longkai Mountain. The princes, concubines, and princesses in the palace also went out to observe the rare thundercloud phenomenon. The heavenly tribulation was more difficult than Zhang Qingsheng had imagined. An hour later, his spiritual force was almost exhausted, but the lightning did not weaken. Instead, it intensified. He closed his eyes and his expression was ugly. At this point, he had no other choice but to hold on. If he was not careful, he might be struck by lightning and turn into ashes. Hua Jiangxin believed that Zhang Qingsheng did not rely on a magical trick. Instead, he was really undergoing the lightning tribulation, just like in the legends. She stared at him with admiration and worry, fearing that something would happen to him. In the distance, there were still many disciples watching. The devotees who were temporarily staying in Longkai Temple discussed animatedly behind them. At first, they were still terrified, fearing that they would be struck. However, later on, they discovered that the lightning only struck one place. Therefore, they carefully approached and witnessed this shocking scene. Crossing the lightning tribulation in the air. Zhang Qingsheng had become a god in their hearts. Mangekyō Wang was also worried about Zhang Qingsheng. At the same time, she had mixed feelings. Was this junior brother really the reincarnation of an immortal? Zhang Qingsheng did not know what they were thinking, nor did he have the time to think about it as he focused on transcending the tribulation. Just as he was worried, the lightning tribulation finally began to weaken. It came and went quickly. In less than 3 minutes, the lightning tribulation completely stopped and the thunderclouds dissipated. Zhang Qingsheng felt as if a huge burden had been lifted from his shoulders. When the sunlight shone on him, spiritual energy began to erupt in his body. The spiritual energy between heaven and earth frantically entered his body and resonated with his spiritual energy, stimulating more spiritual energy. From the perspective of others, he was surrounded by a whirlwind that even swept up leaves. Immortal. Human. A middle-aged man's voice trembled as he knelt down and kowtowed to Zhang Qingsheng. His reaction also caused the other visitors to kneel down. Those rational visitors looked at each other. Seeing their crazy appearance, a thought surfaced in their minds. What if he was really an immortal, and they did not kneel when they saw him? Wouldn't they be offending an immortal? Just like that, all the pilgrims knelt down and kowtowed to Zhang Qingsheng while praying for themselves. The disciples also knelt down one after another and looked at Zhang Qingsheng with fanaticism. Mingyu, who often trained with Zhang Qingsheng, was extremely excited. He had obtained the grace of an immortal. Mangekyō Wang did not kneel. She merely looked at Zhang Qingsheng in a daze. No one knew what she was thinking. Zhang Qingsheng had completely stepped into the 5th level of the Dao technique. His spiritual force surged, his senses changed, and the range of his divine consciousness expanded. 2 intersecting golden patterns gradually appeared between his brows, faintly looking like the simplified painting of the twin fishes in Taikai. Chapter 22 9 Heaven's Mysterious Change. Opening incense. After successfully transcending the tribulation, Zhang Qingsheng was still floating in the air, consolidating his cultivation. When the sun set, the devotees dispersed. Mangekyō Wang also dispersed the disciples, not daring to disturb him. At dusk, Zhang Qingsheng slowly opened his eyes. The golden pattern between his eyebrows disappeared. This was a Dao pattern, the mark of the 5th level of the Dao technique. Its function was that it could store spiritual energy. It might even have more functions. However, he had just come into contact with it and was unclear. Dao patterns could usually be hidden, which was very convenient. Zhang Qingsheng landed in the courtyard. His Taoist robe was not damaged and he looked relaxed and energetic. Hua Jiangxin came up and cupped his fists. Congratulations, Taoist master, on your increase in martial arts. Even though she did not know what was going on with the previous tribulation, she felt that it should be related to the increase in Zhang Qingsheng's strength. Zhang Qingsheng smiled and nodded. It's not a huge increase. I just comprehended the true meaning of heaven and earth. Hua Jiangxin did not understand, but she felt that it sounded awesome. She admired Zhang Qingsheng even more. Zhang Qingsheng did not say anything else to her. He turned around and returned to the house with White Dragon following behind him. The man and the snake entered the house. Hua Jiangxin was stunned for a moment before she started practicing martial arts in the courtyard. Inside the house, Zhang Qingsheng sat on the bed as a line of words appeared before his eyes. 21 years after the founding of the dynasty. Your cultivation has improved and you have comprehended the true meaning of heaven and earth. You have passed the minor heavenly tribulation and obtained a survival reward secret technique, 9 Heaven's Mysterious Change, secret technique? This was the first time Zhang Qingsheng had obtained a secret technique, and he was filled with interest. He immediately accepted the memories of the 9 Heaven's Mysterious Change and a large number of memories surged into his mind. The Nine Heavens mysterious change was a transformation technique that could transform into 9 forms, from a sparrow to a mountain. Not bad, not bad, good stuff. Similar to the Phantom God's Eye, even though it could not improve one's strength, it had endless uses. After Zhang Qingsheng sorted out his memories, he began to cultivate the first level of the Nine Heavens mysterious change, the transformation of a swallow. That night, the disciples of Longkai Temple found it hard to fall asleep, and there were also many people in the capital who were curious. In the next 5 days, the news of the pilgrims watching Taoist Master Qingsheng undergo the lightning tribulation spread out, causing an uproar in the entire city. Even the concubines in the palace were discussing it. He killed the ghost-eyed evil king at a young age and underwent lightning tribulation when he reached adulthood. When these 2 deeds of Taoist Master Qingsheng were combined, it was really legendary and filled with mystery. More and more visitors came to Longkai City to burn incense. They all wanted to see Taoist Master Qingsheng's elegance. However, Zhang Qingsheng did not come out of his courtyard, so they failed to catch a glimpse of him. They were not angry because of this. Instead, they felt that it was only right. How could immortals be so easy to meet? Inside the house. After 5 days of cultivation, Zhang Qingsheng finally learned the transformation of a swallow, but it could only last for 5 minutes. The Nine Heavens mysterious change consumed too much spiritual force and could not be easily used. Zhang Qingsheng returned to his original appearance, and White Dragon was stunned. At that very moment, 3 lines of words appeared in front of Zhang Qingsheng. Detected that you have received incense. As your cultivation method does not belong to the Tao of heaven and earth, you have 2 choices and can only choose one. 1. Give up on cultivation and your spiritual force will transform into a realm of martial arts in this world true God realm. 2. Continue to cultivate. Immortals are above all living beings and are respected by all. The path of cultivation is to pursue the path of the heavenly Tao. You can activate the incense function, true God realm. He had never heard of it before. It must be above the heaven or rival realm. Zhang Qingsheng directly chose the second option and continued to cultivate. For an immortal cultivator to fight a martial arts practitioner, it was simply child's play. He had to persevere. If he were to train in martial arts, even if he were to become the number 1 in the world, it was impossible for him to suppress all the martial artists in the world. After all, they were all on the same path of cultivation. However, cultivation was different and the upper limit was unknown. Activating the incense function. The providence of incense can weaken the power of the heavenly tribulation. Please explore on your own how to obtain incense. Current incense points, 2 inches reduce the power of the heavenly tribulation? Zhang Qingsheng still had lingering fears when he recalled the lightning tribulation a few days ago. In his previous life, he had indeed set up the incense function in the game. When one cultivated to become a god, they naturally had to enjoy the incense of the human world. Incense was related to the luck of the immortals and gods. He did not expect the survival system to bring other functions of the game to this world. The incense function was not only about transcending the tribulation. 2 points of incense meant that 2 people had erected a statue for him and burned incense to worship him. To be able to do this, it meant that they had regarded him as their faith. Wait, if even the incense function appeared, then the other functions. Zhang Qingsheng's heart burned with passion. The system might seem mysterious, but he, as the developer, knew everything about it. All the functions in the game needed to be triggered by the player on the way to cultivation, not directly given. In addition, from the previous hints, cultivation did not belong to this world. He might very well be the only cultivator. Incense is indeed valuable, but I can't be rash. I can create some phenomena in the Taoist temple and increase the circulation. By doing that, the incense value should increase. Even if someone is unhappy with me, they can come and give me a survival reward. Zhang Qingsheng thought to himself. He did not know if there were true gods in the Great Jing dynasty, so he had to be careful. He did not enter the world for the sake of his safety. What if there was a flourishing martial arts civilization outside the Great Jing dynasty? Better to believe it than not. He had to work hard in the early stages of his life. In any case, his lifespan was unlimited. Once he was strong enough, he would rule the world. Of course, before that, he still had to make a trip to the palace. Zhang Qingsheng's eyes flickered and the corners of his mouth curled up. A month later, Zhang Qingsheng completely mastered the Nine Heavens mysterious change. On this day, Zhang Yuan came to visit him again. Other than asking for medicinal pills, he was also curious about his tribulation. Zhang Qingsheng did not say that it was a breakthrough in his cultivation. Instead, he said that the immortals were guiding him at that time. Zhang Yuan was stunned when he heard that. After Zhang Yuan left, that night, Zhang Qingsheng put on a wooden mask and changed into a ragged black Taoist robe before leaving for the palace. He stepped on the Tai-Hang sword and flew on it, directly flying into the palace from the top of the mountain. His senses far exceeded that of ordinary people. From afar, he could see the Imperial Guards patrolling outside the palace. He found a corner that no one noticed and flew in. After landing, he gently sheathed the Tai-Hang sword and began to move forward in the palace. Late at night, the palace was lonely with frogs croaking. From time to time, eunuchs would patrol with lamps. Relying on the 9 seeking heavenly dragon steps, Zhang Qingshan easily dodged those eunuchs. Along the way, he investigated the fluctuations of true qi and discovered that there were quite a number of experts in the palace. There were at least 50 top experts, and there was no lack of concubines, palace maids, and eunuchs. The Great Jing Palace was filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Zhang Qingshan sighed as he walked. When he passed by a garden, he heard a sound. He tilted his head and listened. The sound came from the depths of the garden. Annoying. My little brother, go down a little more. There are too many mosquitoes here. Can't we go somewhere else, damn it? Alas, just make do if there's a place. Hurry up, I'm dying of anxiety. Zhang Qingshan was speechless. Was the palace that chaotic? Disgusting. Zhang Qingshan stopped and listened attentively. After a while, he recognized their identities. The woman was a palace maid while the man was a eunuch. A eunuch could do such a thing? Zhang Qingshan recalled that some dynasties in his previous life had not been completely eradicated. He shook his head. Since it was not his father who was cuckolded, he was too lazy to care about it and continued on his way. The palace was very large. Zhang Qingshan used his divine consciousness to investigate along the way. What he was looking for was the fluctuation of true qi, so he did not have to enter the houses of concubines and palace maids. He did not have that kind of urge. There were many fluctuations of true qi, but none of them could reach the heavenly arrival realm. Zhang Qingshan suddenly stopped when he arrived at the northern area of the palace. His gaze landed on an extremely deserted palace courtyard. There were no palace maids or eunuchs, so he was alone in the entire palace courtyard. Could this be the legendary Cold Palace? No way. A heaven arrival realm expert was banished to the Cold Palace by the Emperor? How could Zhang Yuan be so domineering? Zhang Qingshan wore a wooden mask, so he was not afraid of exposing his identity. Carefully, he walked towards the palace. When he entered the courtyard, he noticed that there were weeds everywhere. It was evident that no one had taken care of it for a long time. However, there were many shocking handprints on the wall of the side hall. Zhang Qingshan walked towards the main hall, not afraid of disturbing the other party. After arriving here, he could already determine the other party's true energy level. It was only about 10 times that of the Devil Lord. Zhang Qingshan came to the door and gently pushed it open. The moment he pushed it open, a strong gust of wind blew and knocked the 2 doors against the wall. Zhang Qingshan's tattered Taoist robe fluttered, but his body was as heavy as Mount Tai and he did not move at all. Why did you enter the palace so late at night? A cold and hoarse female voice sounded, her tone filled with killing intent. Zhang Qingshan stimulated the meridians in his throat with his spiritual power and said in a hoarse and dull voice, I heard that there's a heaven arrival realm expert in the palace that is unparalleled in the world. I want to see him. Your skills are so deep, but you're willing to stay in this cold palace that no one cares about? The cold female voice snorted. It's none of your business. Since you're here, don't leave. As soon as she finished speaking, another strong gust of wind came from the darkness. Zhang Qingshan gently moved his right foot and his spiritual force exploded, sending a figure flying back, followed by the heavy sound of someone hitting the wall. You! How is this possible? You're not a heaven arrival. You're at a higher realm. The cold female voice cried out in horror. Who could resist such an expert breaking into the palace? Zhang Qingshan sighed internally. I'm too strong. He asked, what's your relationship with the Emperor? Tell me, and if you explain it clearly, I will spare your life and not disturb everyone in the palace. If you don't explain it clearly, the Great Jing will change owners after tonight. The other party's panting echoed in the dim hall. Zhang Qingshan narrowed his eyes and looked over. He could only see that the other party's hair was disheveled and her body was dirty. He could not see her true appearance. Haha. You used him to threaten me. You used him to threaten me. The cold female voice gradually became deranged and had a sense of hysteria. Zhang Qingshan frowned under the mask. Was she crazy? No wonder she was banished to the cold palace. Zhang Qingshan was only guessing and did not believe her easily. If she was not afraid of death and did not care about the Emperor, why would she struggle at death's door in the cold palace? He suddenly disappeared and appeared in front of the other party the next second. He pressed his palm on the other party's forehead and the terrifying killing intent made the other party unable to move. This strength. The other party widened her eyes. From the gap of her messy hair, he could see his pair of eyes that were filled with blood vessels, similar to a ghost in the human world. Zhang Qingshan looked down at him and said, 21 years ago, the Empress gave birth to child and eunuch Li swapped him. Did you know about this? The other party's pupils dilated. It was evident that she was not calm. She gritted her teeth and said, I know. Why did the Emperor do this? To suppress the Yang family? I don't know. But that's definitely not the case. Zhang Qingsheng's frown deepened and he asked, what's the real identity of the fake prince? The other party was silent. Impudent. How dare you break into my palace? I will make you stay here forever. A domineering shout sounded from outside the hall, but Zhang Qingsheng remained indifferent. He had already sensed Zhang Yuan's arrival, and he had something to ask him. Chapter 23 Mahayana Dragon Tower. Once a sun in the courtyard, a figure descended from the sky. It was Zhang Yuan in dragon robes. Zhang Yuan's hair was disheveled. It was obvious that he was not a crown. He stared at Zhang Qingsheng's back while Zhang Qingsheng quietly kept his scabbard in his sleeve. Let her go. If you are coming for me, I'm right here. Zhang Yuan said in a deep voice. He activated his true chi and condensed a dragon shadow around him. This scene was captured by Zhang Qingsheng's divine consciousness and he was greatly surprised. This special effect was so cool. Most importantly, Zhang Yuan's true energy had increased by dozens of times in an instant, and he was no longer inferior to the women under him. Heaven arrival. This emperor hid himself so well. No wonder he could make the supreme experts of the martial arts world work for him. With his back facing Zhang Yuan, Zhang Qingsheng asked in a hoarse voice, Emperor, what's the identity of the fake crown prince? Hearing this, Zhang Yuan's expression darkened and his eyes flickered. Under the night sky, his expression was so dark and horrifying. How did you know about this? Who are you? Zhang Yuan stepped forward as he spoke. The woman from the cold palace gritted her teeth and said, Don't come over. You're not his opponent. Zhang Yuan stopped and frowned. His gaze was fixed on Zhang Qingsheng, wanting to see through him. Zhang Qingsheng did not bring the Kylin horsetail whisk and the Tai-Hang sword was hidden in his wide sleeve. In the dark environment, he could not see through Zhang Qingsheng's identity. There were many people in his mind. He had too many enemies in his life, and among them were experts stronger than him. Zhang Qingsheng's back was still facing him as he said, as a dignified emperor, he actually took the lead in exchanging bargaining chips for the crown prince position. Won't it be ridiculous if this gets out? It would be fine if the fake crown prince is his biological bloodline, but if not. His words were filled with mockery, but Zhang Yuan was not angry. Zhang Yuan asked, What do you want? Since you want to ask, it means that you are not here for me. Do you know my eldest son? Zhang Qingsheng teased, Of course I know your eldest son. What would he think if he knew that you abandoned him in a temple as an orphaned little Taoist? Zhang Yuan was silent. What Taoist temple? The woman from the cold palace asked. Zhang Qingsheng asked meaningfully, How many Taoist temples are there in the capital? The moment he said that, the woman from the cold palace glared at Zhang Yuan and said in a cold voice, Emperor Zhang, you've been toying with me for so many years? Zhang Yuan's expression was extremely ugly while Zhang Qingsheng was somewhat surprised. From his words, it was obvious that there was something else going on. Zhang Qingsheng wanted to ask more questions, but Zhang Yuan suddenly attacked. He struck out with his right palm, and a dragon shadow appeared around him. With a strong wind from his palm, he charged towards Zhang Qingsheng. The door of the palace exploded into countless pieces of wood. Humphrey. Impudent. Zhang Qingsheng snorted and gently patted his left hand behind him. Spiritual energy spread out and easily dispersed the dragon shadow. His true chi shook the tables and chairs in the palace until they fell apart. What domineering skills! The emperor's strength had actually increased by several times after he attacked. How many times could his father increase his strength? It was really amazing. Zhang Qingsheng lamented in his heart, but Zhang Yuan was even more shocked. How is this possible? He dissolved my true dragon aura so easily. Who exactly is he? It had been a long time since Zhang Yuan felt such pressure. The last time was when he had yet to ascend to the throne. There was actually such an expert in the world. Zhang Yuan instantly thought of many possibilities and even guessed that this person was the one who taught Qingsheng martial arts. Could he be here to support Qingsheng? No. Why did he accept Qingsheng as his disciple? Why did he support him? How did he know the truth? Zhang Yuan was filled with fear and felt that the other party must be an enemy. He did not expect the other party to be Zhang Qingsheng because he had been taken away the moment he was born. It was impossible for him to know his background, let alone dominate everything like this person. There must be an enemy scheming behind the scenes. Emperor, are you still unwilling to say? Zhang Qingsheng reached out and grabbed the woman's neck before lifting her up. He said sinisterly, A heaven or rival realm expert was banished to the cold palace by you. How ridiculous. Zhang Yuan's expression changed. Knowing that he was not his opponent, he took a deep breath and said, I'll talk. The fake crown prince is not my biological son. He is just a chess piece that is destined to be abandoned. If you came to uphold justice for the real crown prince, you can rest assured that he will die sooner or later. As for my reputation, this matter will not spread. I will ask the Yang family to personally destroy him and find an excuse. The death of the crown prince will only be a regret in history. Zhang Qingsheng asked, why did you use chess pieces to replace the real crown prince? Zhang Yuan sighed and said, because he cannot become the crown prince. The throne is already destined. Unfortunately, the Yang family cannot see through him. I sent him out to ensure his safety. If he were to be born in the palace, he would undoubtedly die. At that moment, he heard a large number of footsteps rushing over. It was the royal guards of the palace, specially guarding the back of the palace. Experts with high martial arts skills had already rushed over. The matter could not be blown up. Otherwise, it would disturb his cultivation. Zhang Qingsheng said, who would harm him? Tell me the name. Since you want to protect him, then we have the same idea. Zhang Yuan's eyes were gloomy as he said, the Mahayana Dragon Tower. The Mahayana Dragon Tower? Zhang Qingsheng had never heard of this name. Since he had the answer, he should leave. At most, he would come back in the future. He released his grip and put down the woman from the cold palace. With a leap, he directly smashed through the eaves of the cold palace and disappeared into the night without a trace. Zhang Yuan immediately ran over and supported the woman. The woman pushed him away and said with a cold expression, Zhang Yuan, you've gone too far. I allowed you to give her the position of empress and give birth to Zhang Yu, but you deceived me. I'll kill that little bastard tomorrow. Zhang Yuan stood up and looked down at her with an extremely cold gaze. Can you defeat that person? The woman from the cold palace was silent. Zhang Yuan coldly said, I will fulfill what I promised you, but even a vicious tiger will not eat its cubs. He has become immortal and does not know his background. Why bother? If you are going to cause trouble, the throne will not be so certain. All these years, I have discovered that my sons are all talented dragons. Think about it carefully. The world has changed. You are no longer a princess of the Chu dynasty. Stop being willful. With that said, Zhang Yuan turned around and left, followed by a large number of royal guards. Zhang Yuan's voice came from outside the hall. What happened tonight is not to be spread out. Whoever dares to say it will be beheaded. The woman from the cold palace sat paralyzed on the ground. She smiled sadly. Ridiculous. I'm so ridiculous. Under the moonlight, Zhang Yuan revealed his dragon might. In the darkness, she was like a malicious ghost as she looked at him in a daze, as if she was isolated from two lifetimes. After returning to Longkai Temple, Zhang Qingsheng did not disturb Hua Jiangxin and quietly entered the house. He changed back into his Taoist robe. After going to the palace, he had gained a lot tonight. Firstly, he wanted to confirm that the expert was not his opponent. Secondly, he wanted to confirm the real reason why he had been switched, and the answer he got was the Mahayana Dragon Tower. From Taoist Master King Su's words, he and Zhang Yuan should have colluded. Even though Zhang Qingsheng had been switched, no one in Longkai Temple dared to brazenly kill him. From that, it could be seen that Zhang Yuan still wanted to protect him. Of course, even though Zhang Yuan had the heart to protect him, he also wanted to take the opportunity to suppress the Yang family. It was hard to fathom the heart of an emperor. Perhaps the Mahayana Dragon Tower was also Zhang Yuan's target, so he told Zhang Qingsheng so as to use someone's knife to kill. Zhang Qingsheng was not angry. In any case, his goal was to become an immortal. If the Mahayana Dragon Tower wanted to kill him, they would send someone here sooner or later in exchange for survival rewards. The fact that he did not trigger the survival reward meant that the fight was not a calamity, and he had to accept the fact. A reserved throne? Humphrey, since you, Zhang Yuan, can't do it, then I have to snatch it, self. Zhang Qingsheng's lips curled up. The kinship in this life was very weak. After all, he had the memories of his previous life. Even though he had to cultivate steadily in this life, he did not want to live a life where he had to compromise. What he was afraid of is that there were stronger people in the world, not everyone in the world. This time, he did not use the Phantom God Eye because he wanted to give Zhang Yuan a warning. He had already planned when to use the Phantom God Eye. Zhang Qingsheng was in a good mood, mainly because he was sure that no one in the capital could threaten him. The next day, Hua Jiangxin noticed that Zhang Qingsheng seemed to be in a good mood. He even personally guided her in her training. Zhang Qingsheng was an immortal cultivator, and his immortal cultivation technique was more profound than her martial arts. A few pointers were enough for her to benefit greatly. Internal arts had similarities, but the immortal cultivation system was different. The incident in the palace last night had not spread. Longkai Temple was still lively with visitors. Mangekyō Shuai came to look for Zhang Qingsheng several times. Some of the nobles had too high of a status for her to refuse. After some thought, Zhang Qingsheng asked White Dragon to meet them. White Dragon could also get a spirit-increasing pill every month. After all, it was one of the contributors to the creation of the pill. Zhang Qingsheng did not treat it unfairly. Its intelligence was also steadily improving. Right now, it could understand some simple human language. Occasionally, it would tease even Hua Jiangxin. When it saw Hua Jiangxin's nervous appearance, it would often shake its snake head happily. Mangekyō looked at White Dragon and felt that it was ridiculous. However, when White Dragon raised its snake body and nodded at her, her worldview almost shattered. Mangekyō knew that White Dragon was very human-like, but it was too ridiculous for it to nod to her. Zhang Qingsheng nodded with a smile. Mangekyō could only suppress his shock and leave with White Dragon. After Mangekyō left, Hua Jiangxin walked out of the house and clicked his tongue in wonder. Taoist Master, your snake will become a demon sooner or later. In Zhang Qingsheng's eyes, White Dragon was adorable, but in her eyes, it was a terrifying thing. The more intelligent it was, the more terrifying it was. Zhang Qingsheng smiled and said, "That's great. It can still talk to us in the future." Hua Jiangxin shivered. Hua Jiangxin changed the topic and asked, "Taoist Master, you cultivate all day long with a clear heart and few desires, and you don't see anyone. Your martial arts are clearly unfathomable and you're still young. What are you pursuing?" She had heard of the legendary story of Taoist Master Qingsheng killing the ghost-eyed evil king at the age of 14. Later on, she heard Mangekyō call Zhang Qingsheng her junior brother. This meant that Zhang Qingsheng was still young, so young, but he had no desires. It was honestly hard to understand. Even the illusory gods should have their own pursuits. Zhang Qingsheng smiled and said, "As for pursuit, it's naturally to comprehend the Tao and live longer." Seeing that he was in a good mood, Hua Jiangxin could not help but muster his courage and ask, "That is a long-term goal. What is your short-term goal?" Zhang Qingsheng looked at the blue sky in the distance and said leisurely, "Short-term goals? I do have one. I want a son." Hua Jiangxin was stunned, thinking that she had misheard. As she stared at Zhang Qingsheng's handsome side profile, her ears began to turn red and her heartbeat sped up. Zhang Qingsheng's attention was attracted by the scenery outside the city. Longkai Temple was located at the edge of the capital. On one side was the city area, and on the other side were the city walls. Outside was a continuous stretch of wilderness. An army was rushing over from outside the city. Chapter 24 Cultivating the Sage, Challenge of Experts on the official road between the mountains and forests. Dust flew everywhere. A group of soldiers galloped on their horses and raised military flags with the word reputation engraved on them. Leading them was a silver-armored general with a handsome face. He held a spear in his hand and was in high spirits. It was the fourth prince, Zhang Yu, who was now 19 years old. Looking at the distant imperial city, Zhang Yu revealed a smile. He smiled unruly and whispered to himself, "Brother, you won't be able to sit firmly on the throne." 1,000 light cavalrymen in black armor moved forward like dragons, unstoppable. In front of them, there was a stone pavilion by the roadside. There was someone drinking in the pavilion. It was the leader of the Sky Martial Supervisor, Zhong Tanwu, who was once the supreme master of the martial arts world. He put down the wine bowl, stood up, walked out of the stone pavilion, and blocked the road. Zhang Yu rode his horse over. When he saw someone blocking his way, his expression did not change and he just wanted to gallop away. The two sides got closer and closer, but Zhong Tanwu still had no intention of backing down as he calmly stared at Zhang Yu. The horse raised its front hooves, wanting to trample on Zhong Tanwu. Zhong Tanwu's eyes turned cold and his true chi exploded, rising like a wave. Dust flew and the horse was overturned. Zhang Yu leaped and landed on the ground before pointing his spear at Zhong Tanwu. "You dare to block my path at the feet of the emperor?" Zhang Yu coldly said. He was shocked. When did such an expert appear in the capital? His strength was too terrifying. He had seen many martial arts experts on the battlefield, but none of them could compare to this person in front of him. 1,000 light cavalry quickly surrounded Zhong Tanwu. Zhong Tanwu said expressionlessly, "His Majesty wants to see the strength of your Black Wolf cavalry." Zhang Yu frowned and asked, "What do you mean? Just you alone?" Zhong Tanwu raised his right hand in a gesture of invitation and said, "Sky Martial Supervisor, Zhong Tanwu." Hearing this, Zhang Yu's pupils constricted and his hand holding the spear trembled. Even though he was on the battlefield, he had heard of the might of the Sky Martial Supervisor over the years. Powerful. Cruel. Zhong Tanwu continued, "Your Highness, do it. Don't tell me the Black Wolf cavalry that has swept across the battlefield is afraid of me?" When Zhang Yu heard that, his eyes instantly turned red. Courting death. It was noon, and the wind was gentle and sunny. In the courtyard, Zhang Qingsheng, Zhang Yuan, and Zhang Yu sat around a stone table. "Zhang Yu, whose face was covered with bruises, recounted the battle 3 days ago where 1,000 Black Wolf cavalry were defeated by one person. This is too ridiculous. How can one's martial arts be so strong? My brothers are all powerful people who can fight against dozens of enemies. Also, Zhang Danwu is completely merciless. Father, are you not going to punish him? The more Zhang Yu spoke, the more excited he became, while Zhang Yuan laughed out loud. Such a scene was really like a family of 3. Zhang Qingsheng sighed internally. Zhang Yuan probably facilitated this gathering to comfort his heart. Zhang Qingsheng knew their real relationship, but he could not say that Zhang Yu was someone he did not know. Zhang Yu looked at Zhang Qingsheng and said, Brother Qingsheng, can you defeat Zhang Danwu? Help me teach him a lesson. If you do, I will satisfy whatever you want. Zhang Qingsheng asked helplessly, Are you serious? Zhang Yu chuckled and said, Of course it's a joke. I can't wait to curry favor with him. Even though he was rude, he had beaten me into submission. Moreover, he is a supreme expert in the martial arts world. To be able to work for our Zhang family is also a great honor. Since ancient times, with a change of dynasties, the underworld was still the same. It would be affected by the court, but it would not be annexed. Zhang Yuan smiled and said, Zhang Danwu is indeed proud and arrogant, but I need him to rope in the experts of the martial arts world. Great Jing has been established for 21 years, and the surrounding dynasties have also submitted one after another. However, the dynasties further away cannot be shaken. After dozens of years of war, the martial arts in this land has declined greatly. It is not as prosperous as the martial arts of the distant dynasties. Even though dynasties cannot be defeated by one person, there are as many experts as the clouds. They can also defeat thousands of troops and horses and shake dynasties. He sighed. He thought of the mysterious person who trespassed the palace that day. His strength was so terrifying that he even felt that Zhang Danwu was not his opponent. Zhang Yuan changed the topic and said, Qingsheng, there seems to be someone else in your courtyard? Zhang Qingsheng pretended to hesitate and said, Jiangxin, come out. Hearing that name, Zhang Yuan could not help but raise his eyebrows while Zhang Yu was curious. At that moment, Hua Jiangxin walked out of the room. Zhang Yu widened his eyes and said, Brother Qingsheng, you are a Taoist priest. How can you hide a woman? Zhang Qingsheng rolled his eyes at him. Zhang Yuan stroked his beard and said with a smile, Longkai Temple is not a traditional Taoist temple. Taoist Master Kingsu is the founder of the sect, and it can be regarded as a martial arts sect. There is no prohibition against disciples from getting married and having children. However, it is best to get married after leaving the mountain. If Qingsheng wants to get married, I can issue a decree to allow it. Zhang Qingsheng said helplessly, Your Majesty, this woman's identity is special. I have a request. Zhang Yuan teased, Tell me. Hua Jiangxin walked over and bowed respectfully to Zhang Yuan. Zhang Qingsheng said, She was originally from the White-Robed Guards and was severely injured by the Devil LRD. I was the one who saved her. She has been practicing martial arts with me all these years, so it's not convenient for her to return because. I hope your Majesty can arrange for her to enter the White-Robed Guards again in the future. Zhang Yuan asked curiously, Why in the future? Hua Jiangxin said, I want to practice martial arts with Taoist Master first. Zhang Yuan nodded and said, I've learned that you were the only one who took action during those nights. You have contributed greatly, so I should have rewarded you. When you want to return to the White-Robed Guards, I'll arrange for you to become a 1,000-man commander. Hua Jiangxin was pleasantly surprised and hastily thanked Zhang Yuan. There were a total of 50,000 White-Robed Guards. The leader was the chief guard, followed by the 1,000-man commanders. 1,000-man commanders represented higher salary level, and among the White-Robed Guards, it also represented the power to mobilize 1,000 people. How could Hua Jiangxin not be happy about this promotion? Zhang Qingsheng then told her to leave. The three of them chatted for a while before Zhang Yuan left with Zhang Yu. Before he left, he asked for more medicinal pills. Hearing this, Zhang Yu widened his eyes in disbelief. It turned out that his father did not come to a sudden realization, but changed to someone else to refine pills. Even though Zhang Yu was puzzled, he did not dare to ask. That was because Zhang Yuan hated it when others talked about how he pursued the immortal Tao. For that reason, Zhang Yuan had beheaded many people. After they left, Hua Jiangxin walked out of the house again. She came to Zhang Qingsheng's side and asked in confusion, Taoist Master, why do you want me to return to the White-Robed Guards? Zhang Qingsheng had refined a talisman that contained his spiritual force, and it could help Hua Jiangxin conceal her aura. However, Zhang Qingsheng told her not to hide it. Zhang Qingsheng picked up his teacup and said, Haven't you always wanted to work for me? How about you enter the White-Robed Guards as my eyes in the future? Hua Jiangxin was stunned. He did not expect Zhang Qingsheng to covet the imperial power. The White-Robed Guards were directly under the imperial power. She carefully asked, "Who are you targeting? Or are you planning something?" Zhang Qingsheng said, "To plot for the throne." Hua Jiangxin turned pale and said in a low voice, "Taoist Master, the throne is not something you can obtain just by killing the emperor. It also requires the support of the civil and military officials. You have to think carefully about the support of the aristocratic families." No matter how powerful Longkai Temple was, Zhang Qingsheng was only a Taoist priest. What right did a Taoist priest have to steal from a country? Rely on these Taoist priests? Zhang Qingsheng smiled and said, "I don't want to be the emperor. I want to cultivate the Tao, but I can let my son be the emperor. Do you know my real identity?" Hua Jiangxin shook his head, feeling even more confused. "Then do you think His Majesty only came because of my medicinal pills? If that's the case, why did he recommend the fourth prince to come into contact with me?" Zhang Qingsheng said with a spurious smile. After interacting with him for so many years, Hua Jiangxin did not do anything bad and could already be trusted. He decided to reveal the truth and rope in a team for his future son. Hua Jiangxin frowned and thought hard. All of a sudden, she thought of something and her expression changed drastically. The fourth prince and the crown prince are both born to the empress. In the past, the empress went crazy and said that the crown prince was not her son. Could it be? Zhang Qingsheng calmly said, "That's right, I am the real crown prince. Tell me, do I have the qualifications to covet the throne?" Hua Jiangxin was shocked and widened his beautiful eyes. Zhang Qingsheng recounted his childhood experience and what he knew, which stunned Hua Jiangxin. She already knew that the royal family was complicated, but she did not expect it to be so complicated. It was too ridiculous. From Zhang Qingsheng's point of view, she also felt indignant. He was supposed to be the crown prince, but a dragon had fallen to the mortal world. Hua Jiangxin frowned and said, "I've heard of the Mahayana Dragon Tower. It's a holy land of martial arts for thousands of years, and its traces are hard to find. For today's martial arts world, it's illusory and intangible. I didn't expect it to really exist and control the imperial power." Zhang Qingsheng faintly said, "That's why I want to nurture an emperor who is not at the mercy of the forces behind the scenes. I want a virtuous sage who empathizes with the people. Not only can he fight for me, but he can also make the world more stable and creating a peaceful and prosperous world. Jiangxin, are you willing to help me?" When Hua Jiangxin thought of Eunuch Li's sinister expression when he stood in front of the imperial gates that night, the flames of anger in her heart were ignited. All of a sudden, she felt a strong sense of duty as if she was a scholar would die for his bosom friend. "Taoist Master, you saved me. I am willing to help you." "Very well. Thank you, Jiangxin. I will only tell you this. No one in the Taoist temple knows, not even the emperor. Jiangxin will definitely go through fire and water for the Taoist Master. I won't let you die." "Yes. But Taoist Master, where is your son?" Hua Jiangxin blushed when he heard Zhang Qingsheng's words and hastily changed the topic. Zhang Qingsheng revealed a vexed expression and said, "Ah. That's right. I don't know when my son will appear, so train hard all these years and wait for me to give birth to a son." When Hua Jiangxin heard this, he felt inexplicably uncomfortable and could not help but ask, "You already have a wife and concubines?" "Of course not. I'm still looking for one." Hua Jiangxin gritted his teeth and said, "Then can I do it?" Zhang Qingsheng looked at her in surprise, making her face turn even redder. In fact, Hua Jiangxin had long admired Zhang Qingsheng. How could she not be tempted by such a powerful and handsome young man who had saved her life? However, she owed Zhang Qingsheng her life and did not dare to have any improper thoughts. Now that Zhang Qingsheng wanted a son, she suddenly felt that her chance had come. Zhang Qingsheng was silent as he carefully sized up Hua Jiangxin's pretty face. She was pretty, so their child would not be ugly if she gave birth to a son. Hua Jiangxin lowered his head. His ears were red and he was extremely shy. In the 22nd year after the founding of the dynasty, the cold days had arrived. At the beginning of the year, Zhang Qingsheng's deeds of transcending the tribulation and the story of White Dragon's intellect began to spread from the capital to the world. Starting from that year, experts from the pugilistic world came to challenge Longkai Temple one after another. At first, Mangekyō Shuang and the other disciples could still resist. Later on, when top experts appeared, Zhang Qingsheng had no choice but to push out Hua Jiangxin to resist for him. Even though Hua Jiangxin had yet to reach the heavenly arrival realm, she had learned the jade pure meridian cutting needle. Ordinary top experts were not his opponent. Until this day. Wan Li ran over and said anxiously, "Senior brother Qingsheng, Senior brother Meng has brought a group of experts here to challenge you. If you don't take action, he will kill White Dragon." Chapter 25 Earth Spirit Tree, Battle for the Emperor's Authority. Dozens of disciples and devotees gathered around a small bridge at the entrance. In front of them was a row of servants, led by Mangekyō, the former eldest disciple of Longkai Temple. After being away for many years, Mangekyō had become more mature. He wore a rich purple robe, a jade thumb ring on his finger, a flowing silk jade brocade belt around his waist, and Qian raccoon boots. He looked very dignified. He stared at White Dragon in front of the small bridge expressionlessly. White Dragon was not afraid at all even though it was surrounded by many people. Right now, it was already 3 meters long and could be considered a huge snake. However, it was famous for being kind, so no one was afraid of it and even felt that it was not a threat. Mangekyō pushed the disciples away and walked over. She stared at Mangekyō and said, "Second brother, what do you mean?" Mangekyō played with the thumb ring on his finger and said, "Nothing much. I just want to test Taoist Master Chingsheng's strength. In the past, I always wanted to compare notes with him in the Taoist temple, but I was always rejected. He should agree today, right?" Mangekyō frowned and said, "Since it's a spar, why did you bring people and threaten him?" Mangekyō pulled out a dagger from his waist and said, "Little sister, don't ask anymore. Right now, we are strangers. Call Chingsheng out. As long as he defeats me, I will not disturb you again." There was a handsome young man behind him. He looked to be 15 to 16 years old, but his eyes seemed to be deep. He smiled and said, "Hurry up. I can't wait any longer." Mangekyō gritted his teeth and aimed the dagger at White Dragon, preparing to stab it. "I'm here." A light voice sounded and the disciples made way. Zhang Qingsheng walked over and the devotees immediately cried out in surprise. "He is Taoist Master Qingsheng? So handsome. With his temperament, could he really be an immortal god? Even the horsetail whisk in his hand is different from other Taoists. It looks extremely extraordinary." Zhang Qingsheng's image was extremely outstanding, especially after he broke through to the 5th level of the Tao technique. His aura was almost one with heaven and earth, existing in the vast sky. Mangekyō stopped and looked at Zhang Qingsheng with an aggressive gaze. The young man behind him was also carefully sizing up Zhang Qingsheng. The reason why Zhang Qingsheng came out personally was because of this young man. He was extremely close to the heaven arrival realm, and his true chi was even stronger than Huajiangxin. The disciples of Longkai Temple were absolutely not his opponent. How old was he? Zhang Qingsheng even suspected that this young man was cultivating. Mangekyō said, "Qingsheng, come on. Let me see your strength." He assumed a posture, clenched his fists, and opened his mouth like an evil tiger. His legs were spread open, and he was as stable as Mount Tai. Zhang Qingsheng nodded slightly and thought to himself, this senior brother has become a peerless expert. It seems like his opportunities are not small. Unfortunately, it's still the work of a 3-legged cat. Mangekyō dashed to Zhang Qingsheng so fast that the onlookers could not keep up. Bang! He punched Zhang Qingsheng's chest, but the latter did not move at all. Instead, his Taoist robe just fluttered. Mangekyō widened his eyes and revealed an expression of disbelief. He gritted his teeth and poured all his true chi into his right arm, wanting to suppress Zhang Qingsheng, but it was still useless. At that moment, the young man suddenly moved. Taoist Master Qingsheng is really powerful. Do you mind if I lend him a helping hand? The young man came behind Mangekyō with a teasing and provocative smile. He raised his right palm and pressed it on Mangekyō's shoulder. Surging true chi erupted and Mangekyō was shocked. Their true energy attacked Zhang Qingsheng at the same time, but Zhang Qingsheng's feet were as firm as tree roots. The two of them were moved. How is it possible? The young man was horrified. He was well aware of his strength. Ordinary top experts could not withstand 3 moves from him. After all, he relied on his powerful internal arts. Mangekyō also knew the strength of the young man behind him. He originally thought that the young man would have a 90% chance of winning, but he did not expect that the two of them would not be able to win even if they joined hands. Zhang Qingsheng said calmly, "Both of you, go back and train well." Boom. The young man and Mangekyō vomited blood and flew out. They smashed into the entrance and almost rolled down the stone steps. Those servants were so frightened that they immediately surrounded the young man to examine his injuries. One of them shouted angrily, "How dare you? How dare you hurt the 7th prince? You're courting death." 7th prince? The 7th prince? The visitors were in an uproar, and the disciples were also frightened. Zhang Qingsheng shook his head and said, "Are you trying to slander me for wanting to harm the 7th prince in front of everyone? It was originally a spar between me and senior brother Meng, and it was the 7th prince who took the initiative to attack you. Injuring the 7th prince is a crime punishable by death." The servant roared with a hideous expression, but he did not dare to attack Zhang Qingsheng. At this moment, the 7th prince stood up and came to the servant. He slapped him and snorted. "Disgraceful thing, get lost." The servant was scared out of his wits and did not dare to be arrogant again. The 7th prince wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and cupped his hands at Zhang Qingsheng. Taoist Master Qingsheng is indeed powerful. I'm afraid no one in the martial arts world can defeat you. I'm convinced of my defeat, and I won't let anyone disturb me in the future. I hope you won't hold a grudge against me. I really want to befriend you." Zhang Qingsheng chuckled and said, "It's just a martial arts spar. If your highness wants to come and offer incense, Longkai Temple will always welcome you." The seventh prince smiled and turned to leave. Mangekyō stood up and looked at Zhang Qingsheng with a complicated expression before following the seventh prince down the mountain with the other servants following closely behind. The disciples and devotees surrounded him one after another and cheered for Zhang Qingsheng. Zhang Qingsheng did not attack just now, but he displayed the elegance of a Taoist master and easily repelled powerful foes. In fact, Zhang Qingsheng had also guessed that the other party was a prince because this kid's true chi was extremely similar to Zhang Yuan. Even Zhang Yuan the second prince did not have such true chi. True dragon energy. Zhang Qingsheng left after exchanging pleasantries with the surrounding people. White Dragon stayed where it was and enjoyed the worshipper's love. After returning to the courtyard, a line of words appeared before Zhang Qingsheng's eyes. In the 22nd year after the founding of the dynasty, the seventh prince attacked you with Mangekyō. You successfully repelled them and survived a calamity. You have obtained the survival reward spiritual item, the Earth Spirit Tree. Spiritual item. This was the first time he had seen this term. Zhang Qingsheng thought to himself before returning to his room to accept the memories about the Earth Spirit Tree. The Earth Spirit Tree was a type of tree that bred spiritual energy. It could give birth to intelligence after it reached adulthood and could even defend its territory. It was a pretty good tree. Zhang Qingsheng took it out. Currently, it was only a seed. He got out of the house and buried it in the middle of the courtyard. Hua Jiangxin walked out of the room and asked curiously, "What is this?" Zhang Qingsheng smiled and said, "Just now, as we were walking on the road, a seed suddenly fell from the sky. Perhaps it's a gift from the heavens. Let's try and see if we can grow a huge tree." Hua Jiangxin was silent. She was already used to Zhang Qingsheng's random actions. She wanted to ask when he was going to have a son. Ever since Zhang Qingsheng mentioned it last year, she had been waiting. As a result, after waiting for a year, there was no news. She even wondered if she was dreaming. After Zhang Qingsheng buried the seed, he left the sentence and said, "Water it when you are free." Looking at Zhang Qingsheng entering the house, Hua Jiangxin was stunned for a moment before she gently stomped her feet. Even though she was resentful, she still obediently went to the water vat to scoop water. Zhang Qingsheng was not worried about the seventh prince's interruption. Instead, he looked forward to it. He could bring more small troubles like this to help him obtain survival rewards. As long as the unknown Mahayana Dragon Tower did not take action, everything would be fine. When he dealt with the seventh prince, Zhang Qingsheng had deliberately controlled his spiritual force. He only exerted a little force, about 1%, for fear that he would shock those two guys to death. The news that the seventh prince had brought the martial arts top scholar to challenge Taoist Master Qingsheng quickly spread throughout the capital, adding to Taoist Master Qingsheng's reputation. In the imperial garden of the palace, a group of princes had gathered. "Ha ha ha, seventh brother, you actually dared to challenge Taoist Master Qingsheng. You don't believe it? Didn't I tell you the ending of Elder Yang?" The second prince, Zhang Ming, laughed out loud. The seventh prince stood behind Zhang Qian and watched him play chess with his other brothers. In the face of Zhang Ming's sarcasm, he was indifferent. One of the princes stood out and said with a smile, "Seventh brother is young and high-spirited. I can understand. After all, the Taoist Master Qingsheng is a priest favored by my father. How can he not be skilled in martial arts?" The other princes followed suit and comforted the seventh prince, giving him a way out. Zhang Ming curled his lips. Feeling bored, he did not continue. He asked Zhang Qian, "Where's fourth brother?" Zhang Qian placed his piece on the table and said, "Following Zhang Tanwu to train in martial arts." Ever since he was taught a lesson by Zhang Tanwu, Zhang Yu had pestered him to help him train in martial arts. He did not even look for Zhang Qingsheng. In his opinion, Zhang Tanwu was stronger. After all, Zhang Qingsheng was only a Taoist priest, while Zhang Tanwu was the supreme expert of the martial arts world, a legend in the hearts of the martial arts world. Zhang Ming teased, "Big brother, your fourth brother is not simple." After he came back, he tried to rope in military power everywhere. Zhang Qian remained silent and concentrated on playing chess while the other princes pretended not to hear him. Recently, the crown prince, the second prince, and the fourth prince had been fighting openly and covertly. Everyone knew that they were trying to rope in the civil and military officials of the court. As for the emperor, he sat on the dragon throne and thought about annexing ancient Han all day long. Even though Great Jing had won many battles, the territory of ancient Han was vast, making it a long journey to and from. The soldiers of Great Jing were having a hard time and could not reach the capital city. The seventh prince suddenly said, "Speaking of which, what exactly do you mean?" Why don't you let eldest brother stay in the East Palace? The East Palace was where the Crown Prince lived. As the Crown Prince, his position would be unstable as long as he did not stay in the East Palace. All the princes looked at Jong Ki-on. Jong Ki-on's expression did not change as he said, "Father is still in his prime. Why do you have to worry about this?" That's right. Their father still wanted to live forever. The princes shook their heads and laughed. Zhang Ming suddenly asked, "Seventh brother, do you know any experts in the Mahayana Dragon Tower? Is there anyone stronger than Zhong Danwu?" The seventh prince turned his head and said, "Of course. The Mahayana Dragon Tower is the pillar of the great Jing dynasty and is a secret of the royal family. It's just that it's too low-key. Otherwise, how could Zhong Danwu gain the position of supreme martial artist?" Zhang Ming's eyes lit up and he immediately went up. He grabbed the seventh prince's shoulders and pulled him to the side. The other princes did not disturb him. They either did not have any ambition or did not dare to reveal it. The crown prince, the second prince, the fourth prince, and the seventh prince, who was the emperor's favorite, competed for power. In front of the four of them, the other princes seemed to have an extremely low presence. Spring passed and autumn came. It was another good autumn season. In the 23rd year of dynasty, Zhang Qingsheng had been busy cultivating, and his cultivation had increased steadily. However, he was still far from reaching the 6th level of the Dao technique. Moreover, Hua Jiangxin had yet to step into the heavenly arrival realm and was still one step away. Alas, now that the second prince and the crown prince are fighting, they even dare to scold each other in the court. How presumptuous. His Majesty actually doesn't care about teaching the second prince. I think he's starting to be muddle-headed again. Chen Li was pouring out his grievances to Zhang Qingsheng. He was still unbridled and bold. Chapter 26 Dark Moon, Stealing the Skies. Zhang Qingsheng was not surprised by Zhang Ming's fight with the fake prince. Zhang Ming's attitude of wanting to rope in experts was clearly that of an ambitious person. Even though he had received many gifts from Zhang Ming, Zhang Qingsheng did not intend to take action. Ever since he was assassinated, Zhang Ming did not look for him again. Perhaps he had received Zhang Yuan's warning. When Hua Jiangxin heard Chen Li's words, she could not help but tease, "The Chen family is still not taking sides in the fight between the princes." Chen Li said helplessly, "Are they still loyal officials if they take sides?" However, the Chen family might indeed take sides. Hua Jiangxin curiously asked, "Who will you support?" Chen Li trusted both of them. One was a chivalrous person who stood up for him, and the other was a Taoist priest he had watched grow up in seclusion. He did not hide anything and said, "Seventh prince." As expected. Zhang Qingsheng had guessed this when he saw that the seventh prince possessed the aura of a true dragon. He even suspected that Zhang Yuan and the seventh prince had learned the true dragon's aura from the Mahayana Dragon Tower. The word dragon was enough to make his imagination run wild. The seventh prince is deeply doted on by his majesty, and the crown prince has never moved to the East Palace. This is enough to see his majesty's heart. I really don't understand what his majesty is thinking. Since ancient times, abolishing the elder and erecting the young is the beginning of a rebellion. Chen Li sighed and said with a worried expression. Zhang Qingsheng did not comfort him and Hua Jiangxin casually responded. An hour later, Chen Li bid farewell and left. Hua Jiangxin curiously asked, "What are you waiting for? Do you not want a son? Or are you waiting for someone to become the crown prince?" Zhang Qingsheng said, "That's right, I'm waiting." Hua Jiangxin asked, "Why not choose Zhang Yu? You can support him." Zhang Qingsheng glanced at him and said, "Even though we are related by blood, our different environments do not allow us to be close enough. If I support him, there will be too much trouble. Fighting for the throne is only my small goal. My real goal is to cultivate and live forever." Hua Jiangxin did not quite understand. In her opinion, longevity was nonsense. How could there be an immortal in this world? If you are afraid of trouble, won't it be troublesome for you to fight for the throne in the future when your son is born? Hua Jiangxin followed up with a question with a worried tone. In another 20 years, if I were to let him ascend the throne, no one would be able to stop me, and there would be no need for so much trouble. Zhang Qingsheng looked at the sapling beside him. After a year of growth, the earth spirit tree was already 30 centimeters tall and had yet to emit any spiritual energy. Time passed peacefully. In the long years, probably only the earth spirit tree and white dragon could accompany him. As for Hua Jiangxin, Mangekyō Wang, and the other disciples of the Taoist temple, after 100 years, all of them would return to dirt. For the time being, Zhang Qingsheng had no intention of imparting his cultivation method to others. He did not owe anyone around him anything, so there was no need for him to give anyone his all. In this life, he only lived for himself. Furthermore, once he imparted the cultivation method, if it were to spread out one day, his advantage would be lost. When he was invincible and became an immortal god, Perhaps he could consider leaving behind some legacies. Furthermore, even if he were to impart the method of cultivation to the person he cared about, the other party did not have the survival rewards and they were facing the world of martial arts. How could they become immortal and live forever? At that time, when they transcended the tribulation, the rules of heaven and earth would reject them and they would be struck by lightning. By then, they would no longer have a chance to reincarnate, and that would be even worse. Zhang Qingsheng's words moved to Jiangxin. This was the first time she had heard Zhang Qingsheng say such domineering words. That's right. He was already so powerful that he was practically invincible. How strong would he be in another 20 years? Jiangxin did not dare to imagine it, but her heart was filled with anticipation. If her son were to become the emperor, wouldn't that be the most glorious thing for a mother in the world? This life was enough. Time passed. Spring passed and autumn came. 5 years passed quickly. The fight between the crown prince and the second prince was known throughout the world. Outside the capital, the followers of both factions were often assassinated, causing the situation in the capital to become more and more chaotic. The emperor had never interfered, and he was currently in a terrible fix. The great Jing army had marched straight into ancient Han, and they were exhausted. Then, ancient Han found an opportunity to counterattack. After several years of constant losing, the front line was about to return to the border of the great Jing. This year was the 28th year after the founding of the dynasty, and there were many geniuses in the martial arts world. The new and the old alternated, and there were as many talents as there were clouds in the literary world. The seventh prince's power is getting stronger and stronger. His Majesty actually handed over the white-robed guards to him. It seems like he is restricting the crown prince and the second prince, but I think he is actually helping the seventh prince strengthen himself. There are too many experts by his side. All of the 13 assassins of the Sky Mansion have the ability to assassinate top experts. I wonder where the seventh prince recruited them. Chen Li lamented. He did not have much resistance towards the seventh prince because the Chen family had already surrendered to him. Zhang Qingsheng asked curiously, recently, there have been many experts in the capital. Are we going to start a huge war? Chen Li frowned and sighed. That's right. The crown prince and the second prince are frantically roping in experts. When His Majesty personally leads the army to war, I'm afraid there will be a fierce battle. One of the two princes will definitely die. Personally lead an army? Haha, this was giving the seventh prince a chance. If there was the help of the Mahayana Dragon Tower, how could the crown prince and the second prince compare to the seventh prince? Zhang Qingsheng mocked in his heart. Zhang Yuan's favoritism was really good. He said that even a vicious tiger would not eat its cubs, but he would tolerate a son he doted on to eliminate obstacles. Chen Li curiously asked, where is Jiangxin? Why don't I see her? Zhang Qingsheng said, she went to stroll around the city. Chen Li did not think much about it. He knew that the emperor was willing to promote Jiangxin. At present, Jiangxin was only practicing martial arts here, not hiding. This time, Chen Li had brought some precious medicinal herbs with him. As usual, he would bring gifts every time he came. Zhang Qingsheng would not reject anyone. In any case, he would protect Chen Li's life in the future. After Chen Li left, Jiangxin walked out of the house. At this moment, Jiangxin was already pregnant. She came to Zhang Qingsheng and said, the day of delivery is approaching. I'd better go down the mountain to give birth so that the child's cries will not alarm the Taoist temple and cause a flaw in the plan. Zhang Qingsheng nodded and said, yes, you should go out late at night. Jiangxin was already a reaching heaven realm expert, so she was more than enough to protect herself. Jiangxin asked, is the seventh prince's consort also about to give birth? Zhang Qingsheng said, I went to take a look last night. I reckon it will be a few days later than our child. It's not a big problem. He was an immortal cultivator with an outstanding physique. As long as he wanted to have a child, he could. The seventh prince was skilled in martial arts, and so was he. Therefore, he waited for the day when the seventh prince consummated his marriage before he took action. A prince marrying a wife was a big deal. Zhang Qingsheng did not have to keep an eye on the seventh prince. Unfortunately, the seventh prince already had an eldest son. The eldest son was an illegitimate child, and his mother was only integrated into the seventh prince's estate after she became pregnant, causing Zhang Qingsheng to miss this opportunity. After a prince got married, he would move away from the palace. Coincidentally, the seventh prince's estate was very close to Longkai Mountain. Jiangxin stroked his stomach, her face full of gentleness and expectation. Zhang Qingsheng looked at her silently. Even though he was not tempted by Jiangxin, he was a person with long life. Moreover, he had already spent a period of his life with Jiangxin, at least for her, it was already satisfactory. This matter was consensual. Ever since she got pregnant, Jiangxin had clearly become more cheerful and her life seemed to have found meaning. That night, Hueco quietly went down the mountain alone. Zhang Qingsheng stood at the entrance of Longkai Temple and silently looked at her. He began to check his incense points. Current incense points, 381, 381. He wondered how much of the heavenly might this bit of incense value could offset for his next breakthrough. Zhang Qingsheng was getting closer and closer to the 6th level of the Dao technique. For the past 5 years, he had devoted himself to cultivation and consumed spirit-increasing pills every month, so his cultivation had improved quite quickly. The 5th level of the Dao technique was already comparable to the true God realm. One could imagine how powerful was the 6th level would be. Zhang Qingsheng was not sure, but he was looking forward to it. He had yet to encounter a true god. In the current capital, the heaven arrival realm was still the peak. He silently watched as Hueco entered an inn before turning around. Hueco was a low-key person, and she was also a heaven arrival realm expert. Naturally, she would not be in danger. When the day of delivery arrived, he would secretly protect her. In the Imperial Garden, Zhang Yuan and the 7th Prince were drinking tea in the pavilion. The current 7th Prince was no longer a teenager. He looked like the young Zhang Yuan, with his domineering aura. Are there anyone who can match Zhang Tanwu in the Dragon Tower? Zhang Yuan asked casually. The 7th Prince, Zhang Yu, answered, yes, there are already grandmasters coming. They will arrive in the capital in 2 months at the latest. Zhang Yuan nodded with satisfaction. Zhang Yu asked, Father, you were the one who roped in Zhang Tanwu. Since he not listened to you, why keep him alive? Zhang Yuan said, martial artists have their own principles. Who asked you to beat you to it and obtain his approval? In the future, you can just expel Zhang Tanwu. Even though he is arrogant, he does have a chivalrous heart that can protect your 4th brother for the rest of his life. Zhang Yu nodded. Zhang Yuan put down his teacup and said meaningfully, I have paved the way for you. Other than the Crown Prince and the 2nd Prince, you have to spare your brothers' lives. Otherwise, how can our Zhang family establish itself in history? Zhang Yu smiled and said, Father, don't worry. I will never harm my brothers. Oh right, go to Longkai Temple when you are free and be on good terms with Taoist Master Qingsheng. Isn't your princess consort about to give birth to a child? In the future, let him acknowledge Taoist Master Qingsheng as his teacher. Taoist Master Qingsheng is definitely not an ordinary person. Furthermore, he is indifferent to fame and fortune. Such an expert can let my grandson learn a lot. Zhang Yuan changed the topic and said. Zhang Yu lamented, Taoist Master Qingsheng is indeed amazing. However, I have offended him before. When your grandson is born, why don't you bring him there yourself? After Taoist Master Qingsheng agrees, I will visit him in the future to repair our relationship. Zhang Yuan stroked his beard and smiled as he nodded. He felt that his arrangement was perfect. Other than the fake son that had to be eliminated, he could protect all his children and consolidate the Zhang family's future imperial power. 10 days later, Hueco successfully gave birth to a child in a small courtyard in the capital under Zhang Qingsheng's secret protection. After she was pregnant for several months, Zhang Qingsheng saw that it was his son, so he did not have to wait any longer. He asked the mother and son to stay in the courtyard for the time being. Another 5 days passed, and the moon was dark and windy. In the 7th Prince's estate, the princess consort had given birth to a son. The 7th Prince was not present tonight, but he had sent 2 heaven arrival realm experts to guard them. Zhang Qingsheng held his swaddling son with one hand and stepped on the Tai-Hang sword. He stood above the clouds and looked down at the courtyard. The 15-day-old baby did not cry or make a fuss. He was sleeping with his 2 small fists clenched. There were 2 thin marks on his forehead. They were the Dao patterns that Zhang Qingsheng had mastered when he broke through to the 5th level of the Dao technique. If they did not stand together, it would be hard to connect them together. The 2 thin lines on the baby's face were more like a birthmark or a closed third eye. To be able to send 2 heaven arrival realm experts, they should be from the Mahayana Dragon Tower. No wonder they can control the succession of the imperial power. The Mahayana Dragon Tower is indeed powerful. Fortunately, I did not act rashly. Zhang Qingsheng thought to himself. Naturally, he did not care about the 2 of them. His phantom god eye was already very powerful, so it was not difficult to tamper with their memories. Zhang Qingsheng's senses were extremely powerful. His divine consciousness could penetrate the eaves and pry into the situation in the house. He would take action the moment the child was born. My beloved father. Can you see through this trick? I learned it from you. Chapter 27 Golden Wing Great Rock, Idiot is safe. Wow, a loud cry sounded and resounded throughout the mansion under the night sky. The 2 heaven arrival realm experts guarding the princess consort could not help but yawn. Finally, the baby was born. If it were not for the fact that the Mahayana Dragon Tower wanted to support the 7th Prince to ascend the throne, how could they have fallen to being gatekeepers? The 2 of them were named the Double Buddha of Disaster. The short and thin man was named the Doom Buddha. The tall and strong man was named the Luck Buddha. The two of them were biological brothers and had been inseparable for their entire lives. The Buddha of Misfortune smiled sinisterly and said, "Brother, look." The seventh prince's son attracted a sparrow. A sparrow descended from the sky and landed on the windowsill before crawling in through the gap. The Buddha of Hard Luck shot him a glance but said nothing. Never in their wildest dreams would they expect that the sparrow was a human. After entering the house, the sparrow quickly transformed into Zhang Qingshan. There were 2 midwives, 4 servant maids, and the weak consort on the bed. A servant maid suddenly saw Zhang Qingshan and subconsciously opened her mouth. However, she met Zhang Qingshan's golden eyes. Phantom God's eye. When the others turned their heads, they also bumped into each other. The moment their eyes met, all of them were struck and stood rooted on the spot. Zhang Qingshan appeared at the head of the bed as if he had teleported. His gaze met with the consort's. The weak consort only saw a pair of golden eyes before she fell into a trance. The 2 Buddhas of disaster did not hear the commotion outside the door. The sound of a baby's cry echoed in the room. This was the most peaceful situation. Zhang Qingshan cultivated the immortal techniques, so they could not sense his true energy fluctuations at all. Moreover, his footsteps were soundless with the 9 seeking heavenly dragon steps. Zhang Qingshan switched the son in his arms with the son of the 7th prince. He hugged and looked his son in the midwife's arms and thought, since you've came to this world and you're a man, why don't you become an emperor instead of eating vegetarian and cultivating with me in the temple? I'll help you ascend the throne and stand at the peak of the world. This can be considered as fulfilling my duty as a father. Zhang Qingshan followed suit and executed the 9 heavens' mysterious change. He transformed into a sparrow and left. The sparrow's small claws also grabbed a thin piece of wood. It was the transformation of the 7th prince's son. Under the cover of Zhang Qingshan's spiritual force, he fell into a coma and stopped crying. After he left, everyone in the room suddenly woke up. They had worked hard for several hours and thought that they were too tired, so they did not think much about it. The phantom god's eye had changed their memories. They had never seen Zhang Qingshan, and the son of the princess consort was rather strange. There was a birthmark that looked like a third eye between his eyebrows. The 2 Buddhas of disaster had already started to talk about what to eat for supper. They had no idea what had happened. Zhang Qingshan landed in an alley and transformed into his human form. He quickly withdrew his spiritual energy as he was afraid that he would suffocate the baby. He treated the baby as his clothes, so he could transform. However, during this process, the baby could not breathe. Why is he poisoned? Zhang Qingshan frowned and found it strange. He carefully examined the baby and discovered that there was still some toxin left in his body. His brain was half the size of his child, which meant that he would definitely be a fool when he grew up. The reason why he did not die was because of his strange meridians. Therefore, his body was not affected, only his brain shrunk. Looking at his muscles and bones, he was definitely a natural martial arts genius. It seemed like the 7th prince was not in a good situation. There were enemies poisoning his family. Zhang Qingshan originally wanted to leave him to the ordinary citizen so that he could have the identity of an ordinary person. However, he was born with a disability and would probably have to suffer in the future. Furthermore, the poison in the child's body had yet to be eliminated, and it was no less toxic than the poison that Taoist Master Kingsu had been inflicted with. It was very likely that he would die prematurely. The reason why Zhang Qingshan wanted to swap the 7th prince's child was to take revenge on the attitude of the Mahayana Dragon Tower and Zhang Yuan. He would give them a taste of their own medicine. He would also secretly protect his son so that he would not have to worry for the rest of his life. In his plan, he never planned to kill the 7th prince's child. Through the phantom god's eye, no one in this world would know the real identity of the 7th prince's son other than him. Even Hua Jiangxin did not know, so there was no need to kill him. However, this child was born with a defect, so it would probably be hard for him to continue living in the future. It was not that his intelligence had been damaged, but his brain had shrunk. It was already a miracle that he was still alive. It was impossible for him to develop the wisdom of a normal person in his life, let alone scheme against others. Forget it. I stole your fate. You should have been pitiful. But from the looks of it, I saved you. Zhang Qingshan stared at the baby in swaddling clothes and thought to himself. A foolish prince would not have a good ending in the capital. He would even be neglected by the 7th prince. If he were to follow him up the mountain to train, he would live a better life as his disciple. Zhang Qingshan disappeared from his original spot and went to look for Hua Jiangxin. He was prepared to let Hua Jiangxin bring this child up the mountain so that he could settle down. He would say that he was picked up. Otherwise, if he appeared out of nowhere, it would arouse suspicion. 3 days later, Hua Jiangxin returned to Longkai Temple. As he had helped Longkai Temple repel opposing martial arts experts several times, Mangekyō Shuang already knew her. When he heard that she had brought an orphan with her, Mangekyō was delighted. Longkai Temple had a new recruit. Every 2 years, there would be disciples who would go down the mountain to act chivalrous and righteous while searching for orphans. Right now, the number of disciples in Longkai Temple had exceeded 200, mainly because there was enough money coming from the incense offerings. With more money, Mangekyō could afford to raise so many children. Hueco brought the child to Zhang Qingsheng's courtyard. On the way here, I've thought about it. It's better to eliminate the weeds and eliminate the roots, Hueco said with a worried expression. She had repeatedly wanted to kill this child, but when she thought of her child, she could not bear to do so. However, as long as this child survived, he would pose a threat to her child, especially if he followed Zhang Qingsheng and learned unparalleled martial arts. Zhang Qingsheng took the child and recounted his physical condition. Hueco was stunned. He did not expect that the son of the favored 7th prince would be poisoned. Hueco's worries dissipated, replaced by pity. She also understood that without Zhang Qingsheng, this child's fate would be miserable. The dignity of the royal family was greater than the sky. They would not allow a fool to appear and disgrace the royal bloodline. Then give him a name. Hueco sighed. Zhang Qingsheng teased the baby and said, let's call it Pingan. Pingan for peace? That's good. It will be a blessing that he can be safe for the rest of his life. The more Hueco thought about it, the more she felt that it was smooth. At this point, Zhang Qingsheng had his first disciple, named Pingan. Within the palace, Zhang Yuan hugged his grandson and laughed heartily. The 7th prince, Zhang Yu, and the consort were also in the room. Your Majesty, let me take a look at this little grandson too. A gentle voice sounded and a graceful and elegant woman walked in with the help of a servant maid. Zhang Yuan turned around and smiled. Empress, come, come. Don't you think my grandson looks like me? Look at his eyes. The Empress stepped forward and bowed. Then, she walked to Zhang Yuan and sized up the baby in swaddling clothes. The moment she saw him, she was stunned. Zhang Yuan did not notice her abnormality. He looked at Zhang Yu and smiled. I would like to reward your son. What do you think? When Zhang Yu heard that, he was pleasantly surprised and hastily thanked him. The princess consort was the same and was extremely excited. The sons of other princes were not rewarded the moment they were born. Why don't we make him our great-grandson? Zhang Yuan said in a low voice. When he said that, everyone in the room was moved, including the Empress. He shook his head. No, it's against the rules. He will be given the title of King Wei. Hearing this, everyone was still shocked. Before the founding of the country, there was a chaotic war between the vassals. At that time, Zhang Yuan was referred to as King Wei, but he later changed his country name. He was bestowed the title of King Wei. Zhang Yuan looked at the Empress and asked, Empress, what do you think? The Empress stared at the child's face and said, I think it's okay. For some reason, she felt a sense of familiarity when she saw this child. She felt that he was the real Zhang Qian when he was young. Zhang Yuan laughed out loud and became even happier. This kid is amazing. When he grows up, this birthmark will definitely be able to scare people. He is very dignified, just like the reincarnation of an immortal god. Yes, the reincarnation of an immortal god. Why don't we pass it down and say that King Wei is the reincarnation of a golden-winged rock in the sky and has a heavenly eye? Zhang Yuan smiled proudly. He was good at making up legends. Back then, he had made up many legends for himself, and he had always tricked many people into blindly following him. Since ancient times, who could not leave their name in history? Zhang Yu smiled and said, Thank you, father. I will definitely teach him well and let him live up to his name as King Wei and the reincarnation of the golden-winged great rock. He was also very satisfied with his son. He checked his meridians and found that he was a natural martial arts prodigy. Furthermore, he did not cry or make a fuss in just the past few days, and his eyes were filled with spirituality. It was the 29th year after the dynasty was founded. New Year. Zhang Yuan brought little Prince Wei, who was famous throughout the capital, to visit Zhang Qingsheng and made a request for him to acknowledge him as his teacher. Facing this situation, Zhang Qingsheng had no choice but to accept it. Prince Wei became Zhang Qingsheng's second disciple. Before Zhang Yuan left, Zhang Qingsheng asked Hueco to follow him back to the white-robed guards. Zhang Qingsheng said, Your Majesty, since little King Wei is my disciple, why don't you let Jiangxin protect him? After all, in the capital. What do you think? Zhang Yuan was not angry. After all, he was the one who had tacitly allowed the fight between the crown prince and the second prince. He smiled and said, That makes sense. Qingsheng, you're very considerate. Hueco was excited, but her expression did not change. She admired Zhang Qingsheng too much. Not only did he allow their son to become the imperial grandson, but he also allowed her to protect him at all times. It was simply a win-win strategy. Little King Wei had his biological parents to protect and teach him, and he could also enjoy the treatment of the royal family. Compared to Zhang Qingsheng's forceful support, this was much safer. Right now, there were rumors throughout the capital that the emperor intended to train a seventh prince in the Eastern Palace. Little King Wei was the best proof. Since the founding of the dynasty, Little King Wei was the first to obtain the title King Wei, and it was even the emperor who personally bestowed him with a title. Just like that, Zhang Yuan left with King Wei and Hua Jiangxin. Zhang Qingsheng looked at their backs and thought, after getting rid of those aristocrats who wanted to harm me, the past will be written off. Father, in any case, he is your grandson's and you have nothing to lose. I will let the great Jing have a better emperor than you, an emperor who is not affected by martial arts forces. He got up and returned to the house. On the bed, White Dragon was curled up, and little Pinyin was sleeping soundly on it. He looked extremely adorable. Ever since Zhang Qingsheng asked White Dragon to take care of little Pinyin, White Dragon had fallen in love with him. It no longer ran around and just accompanied little Pinyin all day long. Zhang Qingsheng sat in the air in the room. He consumed a spirit-increasing pill and began to cultivate. He would strive to break through to the 6th level of the Dao technique before little King Wei grew up and surpassed the true God realm. At that time, he should be able to compete with the Mahayana Dragon Tower. Zhang Qingsheng did not know the strength of the Mahayana Dragon Tower, but he had to overestimate his enemy in order to be invincible. Just treat it as if there were 100 true gods in the Mahayana Dragon Tower. When he could defeat 100 true gods, he should be able to easily control the Mahayana Dragon Tower. Chapter 28 told Franco's crazy and dreams of wearing a royal robe in the 30th year of the dynasty. The emperor personally led an army to attack ancient Han and suffered a tragic defeat. 300,000 soldiers were killed, shocking the great Jing dynasty. The atmosphere in the capital was even more tense. All the officials felt insecure because the emperor was old. When they heard that he had lost, they were afraid that the emperor would die. At that moment, the crown prince had yet to move into the Eastern Palace. This year, little King Wei and Pinyin were 1 year old. In the courtyard, Zhang Qingsheng sat under a tree. The earth spirit tree was already 10 feet tall, but the leaves were not lush enough. Right now, it could only produce weak spiritual energy, but it was a good sign. Not far away, little Pinyin rode on White Dragon and wandered around. King Ku chased after him and played games. Even though little Pinyin was born with a lack of intellect, his muscles and bones were indeed extraordinary. At the age of 1, he already had the strength of a 4 to 5-year-old child. He could run and jump. In Longkai Temple, he was already recognized as a genius in martial arts. A figure quickly walked over from outside the courtyard. It was Chen Li. He came to Zhang Qingsheng with a worried expression and said in a low voice, "Qingsheng, something bad has happened. The second prince has disappeared." Zhang Qingsheng did not even open his eyes. "So be it. Didn't your Chen family seek refuge with the seventh prince?" Chen Li said, "The second prince is missing, and I'm afraid the Hong family will rebel. Coincidentally, His Majesty has suffered a defeat in the north. When the capital suffer a rebellion, the situation will be dangerous." Only then did Zhang Qingsheng open his eyes. Zhang Yuan's life before he turned 60 years old was absolutely glorious. Unfortunately, he had been in power for too long, and he had personally led an army in his old age and suffered a huge defeat. His prestige in the hearts of the people had been greatly reduced, and even the civil and military officials were no longer as afraid of him. If the Hong family rebelled at this time, even if they did not succeed, the Great Jing would be greatly damaged. The Hong family's army was stationed outside the capital to protect it, but now it had become a threat. Zhang Qingsheng said helplessly, "If the Hong family wants to rebel, what's the use of telling me?" Chen Li said, "Naturally, I want to remind you that once chaos breaks out, how can your Longkai temple protect itself? Hurry up and hoard food. Even if the Hong family does not target Longkai temple, if the city falls into chaos, Longkai temple will definitely be isolated because the mountain is too suitable for hiding people." Zhang Qingsheng nodded and said, "I understand." Chen Li sat down and did not care that King Ku was beside him. After all, they were acquaintances and Zhang Qingsheng had been on good terms with him for as long as 18 years. After 18 years, Chen Li was no longer the high-spirited top scholar. He was now middle-aged. Unknowingly, time passed so quickly. Zhang Qingsheng looked at Chen Li's weathered face and sighed internally. Not only Chen Li, but the older disciples in the temple had also gradually stepped into their middle ages, including the eldest senior sister, Mangekyō Shuang. Zhang Qingsheng had concocted a total of 3 beauty pills. One was for himself to consume, one was given to the Empress by the Emperor, and the last one was for Hua Jiangxin to consume. In any case, Hua Jiangxin had given birth to his child and was also his wife, so he naturally had to be biased. He did not want to interfere with the lives of others, but his youth had gradually aroused the admiration of the disciples. The Taoist master was indeed skilled. Chen Li said, with the help of the Yang family, the crown prince has 2 more governors and 2 ministers. His right to speak in the court is extremely high. Unfortunately, he does not have military power and the experts under him are inferior to the 7th prince. I suddenly feel that His Majesty left the capital on purpose and allowed the crown prince and the 2nd prince to fight. How could the 2nd prince win against the crown prince? When the 2nd prince dies, the Hong family will rebel and vow to kill the crown prince. When the crown prince dies, the 7th prince can legitimately suppress the Hong family and make great achievements. The heart of an emperor is really terrifying. Zhang Qingsheng felt that it made sense. It was indeed very likely. In any case, he knew that the crown prince would die. After knowing the crown prince's fate, Zhang Qingsheng's hatred for him disappeared. He did not even pay attention to him. Speaking of which, the crown prince was a pitiful person. He was manipulated from the moment he was born. When the Yang family learned the truth, the crown prince would be isolated and helpless, abandoned by the entire world. Zhang Qingsheng said, "Tell me about the underworld." Hua Jiangxin guarded little King Wei day and night. Occasionally, she would tell Zhang Qingsheng about the court, so he did not care. Zhang Qingsheng's only concern for the royal court was the ascension of little King Wei. However, he was still young and was still far from the throne. Before that, as long as the great Jing did not fall, little King Wei would be fine. He would do whatever those people wanted, as his goal was also to cultivate. Chen Li shook his head and said, "I don't have the time to pay attention to the underworld right now." "Oh right, do you remember your senior brother, Li Qingqing?" Zhang Qingsheng nodded and said, "Of course I remember. When he was young, Li Qingqing betrayed Long Kai Tempk and caused Taoist Master King Su to be poisoned by the devil sect." Chen Li sighed. He entered the devil sect for a woman. Last year, that woman died and he went crazy. Right now, he kills everyone he sees in the martial arts world. His reputation is illustrious. 18 sects are working together to kill him. I'm afraid he won't live for long. Zhang Qingsheng was silent. Chen Li comforted him and said, "Don't think too much about it. That's the path he chose. Don't get involved." With the combined strength of the 18 sects, even a grandmaster might not be able to escape unscathed. Zhang Qingsheng smiled and said, "Brother Chen, you worry too much. I won't go down the mountain." Chen Li smiled and then talked about other things. Li Qingqing's encounter had indeed caused waves in Zhang Qingsheng's heart. After all, they were old acquaintances. He thought of Taoist Master King Su again and wondered where his teacher had gone. Half a year later, Chen Li's guess was right. As expected, the Hong family had rebelled. The great general, Hong Lai, led 100,000 armored horses into the capital and straight into the palace. The sounds of fighting echoed in the capital. Zhang Qingsheng opened his eyes, sighed, and stood up. In the end, he could not let go. Zhang Qingsheng gave White Dragon a few instructions before turning into a sparrow and flew towards the palace. At the same time, in the palace, armored horses galloped unhindered. The servant maids and eunuchs all knelt on the ground, shivering. Hong Lai wore thick black armor and rode on a strong black horse as he slowly advanced. He held a large saber in one hand and his expression was fierce. "Lock down the palace and find the crown prince." A general raised his sword and roared. The soldiers received the order and scattered to search. A concubine ran to Hong Lai's side and cried, "Brother, you have to avenge Ming'er." Hong Lai glanced at her and said, "Rest assured, sister. The crown prince will die today." The concubine wiped her tears and asked, "Where is Ming'er? Have you sent someone to investigate?" Hong Lai said, "My soldiers found a corpse outside the city. It was Ming'er's. I can't bear to tell you." Hearing this, the concubine felt as if she had been struck by lightning and collapsed on the ground. Hong Lai shook his head and reined in his horse. His expression became unruly as he stared at the distant throne room and muttered, "Brother Zhang, you've been sitting in this land for 30 years. It's time for me to take a seat." On the other side, in the Empress's bedroom, the crown prince, Zhang Qian, sat at the table with disheveled hair and looked extremely dispirited. The Empress walked in from outside and closed the door. "This won't do. Hong Lai has already killed his way in, and I can't ask the Yang family for help." Zhang Qian forced a smile and said, "Mother, how could the Yang family not hear such a huge commotion caused by Hong Lai? Before second brother disappeared, I already sensed that something was wrong with the Yang family's attitude. My uncle's attitude towards me was not as enthusiastic as before, and there was even some disgust." Zhang Qian did not say that out loud. He could not figure it out no matter how hard he thought about it. In his opinion, all the officials might have abandoned him, except for the Yang family. The Empress frowned and asked, "Did you really kill your second brother?" When Zhang Qian heard that, he immediately became anxious. He gnashed his teeth and said, "How is that possible? He was the one who constantly wanted to fight with me, not the other way around. Mother, haven't I been enduring for so many years? Why am I enduring this? Isn't it because of our brotherhood? I never thought of killing my second brother. Even if I were killed by him, I would never kill my brothers." Even though he was the crown prince, the emperor and the empress had been cold and warm to him since he was young. As a result, he cherished the relationship between brothers. When he was young, his younger brothers needed him and respected him. He had always wanted to protect his younger brothers. Otherwise, his fight with the second prince would not have lasted for years. He was the crown prince, and he wielded great power in the imperial court. It would be easy for him to deal with the second prince. He could even ask the emperor to send Jiang Ming to the border. The empress sighed and looked at Jiang Qian with a complicated expression. Jiang Qian was in a state of panic, fear, and anger, so he did not notice the look in her eyes. The sound of hooves and footsteps could be heard from outside the hall. From the sound, it was obvious that a large number of soldiers were rushing over. "Your fourth brother went to war with your father. Otherwise, with him and Zhang Danwu here, you can still be saved," the empress said helplessly. Jiang Qian gritted his teeth and stood up. "Mother, please don't come out. If I go out alone, only I will die. Why should the Zhang family be afraid of death?" With that said, he walked to the gate without any hesitation and pushed the door open. The courtyard outside was filled with black masses of soldiers. Hong Lai rode on a horse on the corridor outside the courtyard and looked at him from afar. Jiang Qian took a deep breath and tidied his hair. He stepped forward and said in a loud voice, "General Hong, if you don't believe me, I have nothing to say. You can kill or torture me as you wish. When my father and fourth brother return, you will not be able to escape death." The soldiers were silent. None of them moved immediately as they waited for General Hong to speak. Jiang Qian added, "General Hong, even if second brother is really dead, what's the use of getting angry? You're dragging the Hong family down with you. There's only one prince the Hong family can rely on." Hong Lai leaned forward and smiled contemptuously. "Since I don't have the prince's support, I shall wear a royal robe. I wonder what your highness thinks?" "You." Jiang Qian widened his eyes and trembled with anger. All of a sudden, he was enlightened. Could it be that Jiang Ming's disappearance was related to Hong Lai? The soldiers laughed and shouted, "Long live Emperor Hong!" Jiang Qian was furious and rushed towards Hong Lai. He had never trained in martial arts, so he was like a scholar. He was directly kicked over by a soldier and his sword pierced through his body, spilling blood on the ground. Jiang Qian's mouth was full of blood as he stared at the soldier in front of him. There was no longer fear in his eyes, only anger. "Impudent! Hong Lai, are you really disregarding our old friendship?" The empress's voice sounded. Her words were cold as she walked out of the hall. Hong Lai laughed out loud and said, "Sister-in-law, I didn't expect you to still be so beautiful after dozens of years. I wonder what rare treasures His Majesty has fed you. I've already came to this point. Do you think I have a way out? Men, capture the Empress and escort her to my mansion." Ha ha ha. Hong Lai laughed wildly and directly changed the way he addressed the Empress. He had gone crazy because in his opinion, the throne was right in front of him. The soldiers immediately stepped forward. Jiang Qian raised his hand and cursed. "Hong Lai, you're not human. You won't have a good death." The soldier pressing on him immediately slit his throat. He covered his throat with both hands and could not speak. Blood surged and could not be stopped. The Empress was so frightened that her beautiful face turned pale. She retreated in succession and leaned against the door. At that moment, a voice gently sounded. "A dog of Great Jing wants to wear a royal robe? Arrogant and ignorant. Today, you will die a miserable death." Everyone looked up and saw a figure appearing on the eaves of the Empress's bedroom. This person wore a shabby black Taoist robe and a wooden mask on his face. He did not have a weapon in his hand, but he gave off an extremely dangerous feeling as he stood there. Chapter 29 Divine Heart State. Wondrous sex Dharma idol Zhang Qingsheng disappeared from the roof and appeared beside the crown prince, Jiang Qian. With a wave of his sleeve, the soldiers around him were repelled by the spiritual force. Their internal organs were shattered and they died on the spot. He pointed at Jiang Qian, who was clutching his neck and struggling in pain. Spiritual power passed through his hands and he quickly sealed the wound with rejuvenation to stop the bleeding. The reason why he saved Jiang Qian was because of his performance. In the face of a hopeless situation, he was not a coward. He still wanted to protect his mother with the dignity of the royal family. This was the first time Zhang Qingsheng had seen the crown prince who had replaced him. He was doing better than he had expected. No wonder Chen Li respected the crown prince so much. In the end, this fellow was also a pitiful person. As the crown prince, he had never done anything immoral. Instead, he had an excellent reputation. Many citizens hoped that the emperor would pass away as soon as possible and allow the crown prince to ascend the throne. However, even though Zhang Qingsheng had saved him, he would never let him be the crown prince again. "Who are you?" Hong Lai stared at Zhang Qingsheng and asked in a deep voice. He was not angered by Zhang Qingsheng's words. Instead, he was very cautious. Since he dared to come alone, he must be an expert. Moreover, Zhang Qingsheng's movement technique was too strange. He had never seen such martial arts before. The surrounding soldiers trembled and did not dare to get near them easily. The corpses of the soldiers on the ground had deeply scared them. The Empress looked at Zhang Qingsheng in shock and was equally puzzled. Who was this person? Not only did Zhang Qingsheng disguise his appearance, but he also disguised his voice. Even the disciples of Longkai Temple would find it hard to recognize him. His gaze leaped past the layers of black-armored soldiers and looked at Hong Lai on the horse. He coldly said, "You don't even know how deep the waters of the Great Jing are, and you still dare to rebel? What a joke. Be smart in your next life." He raised his right hand and shouted in a low voice, "Rise." In an instant, the swords and spears in the hands of all the soldiers uncontrollably broke free from their grip and flew into the air in unison. Everyone widened their eyes at this scene, including the Empress and Zhang Qian, whose bleeding had stopped. What kind of martial arts was that? Hong Lai tightly gripped his saber and felt an extremely terrifying force dragging it. After persisting for a few seconds, his saber also flew into the air and the tip of the saber was pointed at him. Sword control technique. For this technique, it was not just swords that could be used, any other weapon could be used too. However, the condition was that when the opponent's strength was far lower than his, could he snatch the blade from afar. Zhang Qingsheng lowered his right hand, and weapons fell like rain. Many soldiers were pierced before they could escape. Blood splattered all over the Empress Palace. Hong Lai jumped away from his horse and quickly dodged. The general's martial arts were already very powerful. Otherwise, he would not have become a founding general in the martial arts world. Zhang Qingsheng sensed his true energy. It was very close to the heaven arrival realm, but only close. In less than 10 breaths, hundreds of soldiers inside and outside the palace died tragically with their weapons stabbed into their bodies. Hong Lai's iron armor was pierced and he was covered in blood. He leaned against the palace wall and stared at Zhang Qingsheng as he breathed heavily. He could not escape. There were swords hanging above his head, in front of him, on his left and right sides. His eyes were filled with fear. How could this person's martial arts be so high? He had never seen such a martial arts technique. It was too terrifying. Zhang Qingsheng's voice floated over. "I've said it before. You will die a tragic death." As soon as he finished speaking, Hong Lai's screams followed, accompanied by the sound of a blade stabbing into his body, making one's scalp tingle. Zhang Qingsheng turned around and lifted Zhang Qian. Just as he was about to walk towards the Empress, a voice sounded. "Your martial arts are really evil, but you can't take the crown prince away." The two Buddhas of disaster galloped from the eaves of the palaces and quickly landed in the courtyard. The two of them assumed a fighting posture. Zhang Qingsheng ignored them and looked at the Empress. "Let's go. I'll take you out so that you won't die in the palace." The Empress took a deep breath and said, "Hong Lai is dead. His 7th Highness subordinates will not harm me. They know their limits. Take the crown prince and leave. Please ensure his safety. Please." When the misfortune Buddha heard that, he immediately rushed towards Zhang Qingsheng. His body was like a ghost, so fast that it was hard to see with the naked eye. Zhang Qingsheng turned around and kicked the misfortune Buddha at an even faster speed, stomping him on the ground. The stone slabs shattered and the soil collapsed. The misfortune Buddha opened his mouth and spat out blood. His eyes widened in shock. The Empress and the misfortune Buddha were both shocked. Zhang Qingsheng stepped on the misfortune Buddha with his right foot and carried the weak Zhang Qian with his left hand. He looked at the fortune Buddha in the distance and said, "Is there no expert stronger than the heaven arrival realm in the Mahayana Dragon Tower? Overbearing. What terrifying strength." The fortune Buddha frowned. He was well aware of the strength of the misfortune Buddha, but he was defeated by his opponent with a single kick. He was definitely not his opponent. His thoughts were like lightning. After he thought it through, he said in a deep voice, "Your Excellency is an expert in the divine realm. However, even if you are in the divine realm, it will not end well for you if you offend the Mahayana Dragon Tower." Divine realm? What realm was that? Zhang Qingsheng was surprised. Could it be that there was a mental state between the heaven arrival realm and the true God realm?